CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by Cyber Ears. If you are serious about your podcast hosting needs, you should check out Cyber Ears. Whether you are a podcaster, a radio host, a musician, a narrator, an audiobook author, or simply a school, church, corporation, or anyone else with an audio recording that needs to be hosted or distributed, you should check out cyberears.com. Unlimited bandwidth, fast, reliable, and rugged servers with no hidden fees. Cyber Ears, your audio, your terms.
It's a blast from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo.
Welcome to the CoCo Crew Podcast. A delicious adventure into the world of retro computing news and information. Featuring the Tandy Color Computer.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
CoCo.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to the CoCo Crew, episode 28. Who thought we'd ever get this far, huh?
Awesome.
I am, of course, John Linville, and I am joined by our regular host, Neil Blanchard. Hello, Neil.
Hello, everyone.
And, of course, Myro. It has caught on. Hello, Mike.
Hello, everybody.
and of course, our not so unusual guest host, Boise Pete. Hello, Boise. How are you?
Hey guys, doing great. Great to be here.
we should come up with something for Boise. Be like Bo Pete.
Well, do not do that. I will not accept it.
Little Bo Pete.
Yeah, that'd be funny.
I will body slam anybody that tries that.
All right, we'll get David Ladd to do it. He's game for stuff like that. All right, well, let's see. So where are we? This is our introduction. We are, of course, the CoCo Crew. Time is ticking away. CoCo Fest is just about 7 months away from now. Always very exciting getting closer to CoCo Fest. It's always such a long wait. Although this time we're breaking up the wait a bit. So Tandy Assembly is less than a month away. Woohoo! Very exciting.
You know it is.
About 2 weeks from this recording. Very exciting stuff. Everyone excited about their trip to Chillicothe?
Yes.
I mean, who wouldn't be? Right?
I would make a lot of trips.
Yeah,
I'm make one there next week, I think. So.
Mike's getting an apartment in Chillicothe.
Hey, with a name like Chillicothe, how can you not be excited?
It's pretty exciting, don't you think? I wonder if they have good chili there. Well, anyway. So what's everybody been up to? Anybody working on a cool project other than, I guess Tandy Assembly counts. And Mike, you still working on that awesome display?
Yes, I am. It's going to feature an RGB LED display. I spent a lot of time programming that this weekend, so getting it figured out. It has some difficult Chinese written software, but I'm working with it, and it's pretty cool. It's going to look neat.
Awesome. You and Rick Adams, wow us with the RGB display. Oh, Lord. What about you, Neil? What are you up to?
I have been working on two Tandy 1000s for display at the show. One's going to be TGA graphics, and the other one's going to be VGA. Showing the difference. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
and one of your joypad adapters on there.
Even better.
Yeah, great.
How about you, Boise? You working on anything special for Tandy Assembly?
No, unfortunately, I'm just planning on being there. I've got a packed couple of weeks. I'm going to be in California this week, and then the following week, I'm going to be going to Copenhagen, Denmark, and then sliding back into the States, I think on Thursday evening, and then flying out Friday from Boston to make Tandy assembly, so I really don't have a lot of time, unfortunately. But I'll be there.
That's awesome.
That's all that really counts.
That's some dedication.
Yeah, you don't have to bring anything; just be there.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't. I don't think I'm doing anything all that special, but I have been packaging CoCo cartridges. So there'll be a supply of bomb threat cartridges and a supply of flooded cartridges. I don't know, flooded sold out at CoCo Fest, so there's probably still some demand there, and I'm sure there's plenty of demand for bomb threat. And then I'll have a few of my other ones, my games, Far Fall and Fall of CoCo and Xmas Rush, that are basically just leftovers. But so that's what I've been working on. Nothing else too exciting. And getting the bank account stuff set up for Tandy Assembly. Anyway, and of course, I don't know. I think I'm getting a bit clearer, but if I sound strange, I did have a little attack of Bell's palsy that was affecting my face and making it a little difficult to speak clearly. Hopefully, I'll make it through the show without getting too slurred. Or I could just be drunk. You'll never know. Anyway. All right, everybody sounds like everybody's been busy, but anybody pick up anything cool on eBay or otherwise lately?
I got some cool stuff. It's been a busier than usual month for me, I guess, on eBay. You, John, tipped me off to an NEC AccuSync LCD monitor, so I picked that up. I just got it, but I have not hooked it up yet, but that should support the CoCo 3 and a couple other older systems. Picked up a CoCo 1 composite board for one of my CoCo 1s. Also, I obtained Sinistar by Sundog. I've got a lot of Sundog software, but that's one I didn't have, and that's a cool game. So, and the other item I got was kind of a rare color computer book from 1983. It's called Kids to Kids on the Color Computer. It's about 150 pages. It's in kind of a landscape format, but all the programs, it teaches you how to use the color computer and how to program in BASIC, and it's all written by kids.
Oh, so, cool.
So yeah, very, very cool book. I'm glad I bumped into it.
That's pretty exciting. I picked up a collection of program cassettes for the Dick Smith VZ200, which is, for those not familiar with it, it's kind of similar to the CoCo in some ways. It's like a CoCo, but with a Z80 processor. It has the 6847 video chip. So the graphics look pretty similar to what you get with a CoCo 1 or 2. The tapes are coming from Australia. Still not going to be delivered for another 3 weeks or whatever, so hopefully they'll come in. But it looks pretty good. I've been picking up a few random bits of software here and there, but not too much to really talk about. Although I did pick up I couldn't resist another Metra Alice. So I think it's still an Alice 32 though, but I really want the one that's just an MC10, but hadn't managed to come across those yet. But this one was in a nice little plastic case for carrying around and stuff. It comes with the cassette player and some tapes, so
cool.
That should be cool.
Yeah.
It's a little more expensive than I like, but I'm a fool with his money, I guess. But
well, I'm intrigued by our other system. After Tandy assembly, we need to have a Dick Smith assembly.
There you go. That should be something.
Kind of weird, actually.
That's why I love it.
Oh, Lord. All right. Well, anyone else?
I got one item.
What you got?
Not from eBay, but from Australia. The Tandy Plus card adapter to ISA.
Yeah.
I ordered a few
nice.
of those, so I haven't had a chance to try them yet, but they look pretty nice.
Pretty useful.
I don't know if everyone listening realizes that, since probably not all Tandy 1000 experts, but the Tandy 1000, the ones in the kind of CoCo style case, the expansion cards for that were a special Tandy only kind of card, but in reality, electrically, they were the same as an ISA 8-bit card. And so with a rewiring adapter, you can plug them into an ISA slot in a normal PC. And so that's what you've got there right now.
Exactly. Well, the model number of those machines, it's the Tandy EX and HX. It's the Tandy 1000.
Yeah, very cool. All right. Well, that's probably a good little intro. So why don't we take a little break, a pause for the cause, get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with some announcements and the rest of the show.
This is a thank you from CoCo users everywhere. To Thompson's Radio Shack. Now Thompson's Nail Salon. To Westside Radio Shack. Now Westside Pizza. And to all the other Radio Shack stores that have gone on to better things. The stores may be gone, but the Tandy color computer lives on. Who would have predicted that Tandy's underdog computer would outlast its makers? Thank you to Radio Shack, and thank you to the vibrant color computer community that keeps the CoCo alive.
You've been hearing all the buzz about Tandy Assembly. All Radio Shack and Tandy computer models under one roof. It's happening October 7th and 8th in Chillicothe, Ohio. Don't miss our guest speakers, including Don French of TRS-80 fame, game designer Lance Nicholas, and Scott Adams of Adventure International. Make your reservations today. Call 800-542-7919 and ask for the special room rate for Tandy Assembly. But hurry, the rates are only good through September 5th. Tandy Assembly. Some assembly is required.
All right. Now we're back with some announcements. You're listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast. We are available on Twitter as @CoCo Crew Podcast, all one word. We also have a Facebook page. Look on Facebook for the CoCo Crew Podcast. That's 4 separate words, because we like consistency. We are of course available on iTunes and Google Play for normal podcast downloads, and we're available for streaming via Stitcher and TuneIn. The CoCo Crew Podcast is a member of the Throwback Network. The Throwback Network is a collection of retro-themed podcasts. If you're looking for other podcast adventures with a retro theme to them, then you should probably check out the Throwback Network. Similarly, easy for me to say, we are available on the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. This is also a list of retro-themed podcasts, in this case, technology and gaming-themed podcasts from the 80s. Or not podcasts from the 80s, but machines from the 80s. Anyway, if you're looking for other podcast outlets, do check out the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. And, of course, audio for the CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by Cyber Ears. If you have a need to host audio content online, then you should check out Cyber Ears, where you will get your audio on your terms. If you need to reach us at the members of the CoCo Crew Podcast, we have some email addresses available. You can reach us as show, SHOW, at CoCoCrew.org, podcast at CoCoCrew.org, or feedback at CoCoCrew.org. Either of those will reach all of the 3 regular hosts. If for some reason you want to reach us individually, then I'm available as John, JOHN, at CoCoCrew.org. Neil is available as Neil, NEIL, at CoCoCrew.org. And Mike is, of course, available as Mike, at CoCoCrew.org. Those are our regular announcements. We do have a list of upcoming events we'd like to mention, but since Mike and Neil were both attendees at a recent event, the VCF Midwest in the Chicago area, we thought we'd give them a little chance to give you a rundown of that event and tell you what you missed. So, Mike, Neil?
Well, if you missed the event, you definitely missed a great time. It's always a fun time being there. But what got me this year, which I find from the last few years I've been, is the Tandy presence was very high. There was just so much support for Tandy computers and all different types, like, everything from the TRS-80, Model 1, 2, 3, 4, to the CoCos, Tandy 1000s. It was just amazing.
Yeah, there was a lot of presence there. Let's see, we saw John Mark Mobley there with a CoCo 3. He was playing the new version of Pac-Man, so people could come up and play that. Also, some of the Trash Talk guys were there. Peter Bartlett, he generally comes out to that show with all of his, Z80 based expansion units, and but he had a new prototype this year, and we can talk about it because he had it out in public. But it is a prototype of a bus-driven VGA adapter for the color computer. So this device plugs into the card slot on the side of the CoCo and generates VGA. Does it by snooping, the bus, to eavesdrops on the bus to get the video display, and looks really great. Had some games going on it and playing with it. He's still got a ways to go, but it supports all of the graphics modes. And I think he just has it running on the CoCo 2 right now, but he's working on the modes for the CoCo 3. Might be a pretty interesting product, if he continues to develop it. So maybe we'll see something like that at Tandy Assembly.
Very cool. The video is very crisp on that. I was pretty impressed. And the nice thing is you don't have to modify your CoCo. It plugs right in.
You plug it in, huh?
Yep, exactly. And I don't think he's got artifacts working yet, but that's on his list.
Yeah, that's. I heard him talking about it on, I guess, on Trash Talk, and I guess he really wasn't aware of the artifacts.
Right.
So it's kind of, surprise. Kind of reminded me of a story from Boise's book, when whoever it was that did the CoCo 2 design, they redesigned it, and there was none of the noise that caused artifacts to work or whatever. He took it to his manager and says, "Oh, you got to make the artifact colors work." What?
Yeah, but it was a great time. We palled around a lot with Jim O'Keefe, good friend of all of ours, and
and Jim will be at Tandy Assembly.
Yeah, most of the guys we saw there will be at Tandy Assembly. So good time, and we're looking forward to doing it again here in a couple of weeks.
Yep, cool. Sounds like a good trip. I'm kind of wish I had hopped a plane to make it, but just didn't work out this time.
There's always next year.
But hey, let's hope so. All right. Well, proceeding with the announcements. Whatever. Going on with the announcements. First one is it's an event, but it's not really a physical event. It's a virtual event lasting for the entire month of October. That's a Retro Challenge 2017/10, meaning October event for Retro Challenge. The Retro Challenge is an event where geeks around the world, retro geeks around the world, kind of think up a project to work on for a month, and they announce it and blog about it. And usually we have a few meager prizes to hand out, token prizes. And anyway, it's a cool event. It's a good excuse for people to spend time on their retro hobby, and it's it's kind of fun to read about what everyone's doing. And I happen to be the organizer for the event now, and so make it successful for me and pay us a lot of attention and tell us how great it is. That makes my day. So. Anyway, Retro Challenge, you can links in the show notes. It's retrochallenge.org. And you got a little bit longer, another week or so, to come up with your project and let me know what you're going to work on, and we'll get you listed. All right, on to the physical events, and the first one on our agenda, of course, is Tandy Assembly. That will be for October 7th and 8th, 2017 in Chillicothe, Ohio.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
This is going to be our big event, balance off the year against CoCo Fest. Of course, all manner of Tandy are welcome at the event. So we're hoping to see the Z80 based Tandies, the Model 1s and 3s and 4s, and the 2s and 12s, and the 16s and 6000s, and every other one. Of course, all the Tandy 1000s. There's too many Tandies to name, but we want to see them all, and we're actually expecting to see a pretty good representation of Tandy's various lines of computers. So I think it's going to be a good event. It seems to be some excitement. I've even seen people on the M100 list talk about coming, so
that's good.
Should be pretty cool. Definitely the highlight of my early October. All right, well, moving on to October 21st and 2nd, the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. This is every year it's a big event up in the Pacific Northwest. Retro gaming event encompassing computers and consoles and arcades and whatever else. I've heard nothing but good things about the event. So if you're in the Pacific Northwest part of the United States or somewhere near there, like the Pacific Northwest part of Canada, then I highly recommend you find a way to get to Portland and check it out. All right. Coming up November 17th through 19th, Free Play Florida 2017. Hopefully that is still going to be happening. I haven't heard anything different. I hope they're not, having too much disruption because of the big storms this year. Anyway, retro gaming event looks like a cool thing. I don't know. You go. You tell me. So hosted Doubletree by Hilton Orlando at SeaWorld in Orlando, Florida. So if nothing else, take the kids to SeaWorld and you spend the day at the gaming event. Should be cool. All right, December 2nd to 3rd of 2017. I've got World of Commodore. That should be in Toronto. This is Neil's event, the Commodore event. So what do you think, Neil? It's a good event?
It's an excellent event, and they're adding more and more to it, so it's not just Commodore.
Awesome.
My question to you guys is, who's coming up to see me there?
I might come up.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. I can't commit to that right now, but I should figure out how to do that. Anyway, here to 2018. For those of you who are going to get to Portland Retro Gaming Expo in October, then in February they're going to have a Vintage Computer Festival Pacific Northwest, and that is going to be held at the Living Computer Museum and Labs in Seattle, Washington, February 10th and 11th. Should be a cool event. VCF events are always pretty impressive. Lots of old computers and, old dudes that like old computers. It sounds like a good venue. Should be a great event. Northwest, I'd definitely be looking forward to it.
It's too bad it's not closer to the Portland Retro Gaming Expo.
Yeah, it would be cool to go to both, wouldn't it?
It would, and I'm sure that's going to be a great one in Seattle.
So, well then coming up, balancing off our CoCo year, coming up in April 21st to 22nd in 2018, the 27th annual last Chicago CoCo Fest. And once again, they're always the last CoCo Fest because we never know if there's going to be another one. That'll be held at the Heron Point Convention Center in Lombard, Illinois. So, as soon as you get done with the Tandy assembly, then travel agent, then make your plans. Get out to Lombard for CoCo Fest. Always a cool event.
What's the travel agency that the Rainbow you guys used to use? Posh Travel.
I don't know. Could be.
Yeah.
Sounds like a nice.
Oh, Posh.
Aided by CoCo Cat.
You have to ride the CoCo Cat.
Yeah. The discount code is Touch the Heron.
Touch the Heron. That's right. All right. And, of course, the last event we've got listed right now, July 16th through 22nd of 2018, of course, will be Kansas Fest 2018, held at Rockhurst University in Kansas City, Missouri. It's an Apple II event, but if you can get over that part, it's a great event to go and hang out with some retro dudes and retro people and see a lot of cool old computers doing weird and interesting things. Definitely a cool event. One of the highlights of the event over the years has been the garage giveaway on the first day of the event, where they have a bunch of Apple II gear that they just put out, and anybody who wants it can take it. That I had heard they were not going to have that anymore, but then someone stepped up with their own collection and offered it up, and so there will be another garage giveaway event this year. So if that had made you decide not to go, well, now you've got to change your mind again. So anyway, that is our list of events for this month. So make your plans. Get out and socialize with your retro geek friends. Make some new ones. It's always good. It's always better when you can do your retroing with someone, or at least tell somebody else about it. Cool. All right. Well, let's take another little break, and we'll be back with some news.
This feud between the king and his half-brother, the wizard, has been going on for long before I was around. Presently, the king's scepter has been in the wizard's grasp for over 50 years, and his highness has worked himself into a royal frenzy. At first, he managed to get volunteers to deliver the ransom, promising them great wealth and even a promotion to royal office, but none of them succeeded. I don't know why I decided to go to the public market that day, but there I was, minding my own business, when with a fanfare of trumpets the king arrived, casting his baleful eye about the masses. He fixed his eye on me this time, and now I find myself another unwilling adventurer in the forest of doom. Hey! Oh my word. There's nothing for it now, lad. It's do or die.
Are you ready?
Where's Jill?
She's really lonely. She's been spending hours on her Tandy 1000 again.
Do you think Dave will ever find his true love?
Not if he's been playing Quasar Commander on his CoCo all day.
We used to be lonely.
Until we met on tandysonly.com.
Tandysonly.com is the new online dating site for folks who won't give up their Tandy computers.
You don't have to be lonely at tandysonly.com.
Tandy Assembly would like to thank our sponsor, Boyson Tech. Vintage computer systems, gaming consoles, and parts. Boyson Tech repairs, refurbishes, and sells vintage and game consoles. Be sure to visit them on Facebook. Just search for Boyson Tech, BOYSONTECH. Thank you to Boyson Tech for being a Tandy Assembly sponsor.
All right, CoCo Cruisers, welcome back. Now it's time for our news segment. Starting off our news segment, we have a little sad news. The CoCo game author Dale Lear has departed from us. Dale, I guess, had been fairly recently. Well, I guess he was a cancer survivor and then had been in remission for some amount of time, and then recently had a diagnosis that his cancer had come back, and it was not a lot of notice, from my understanding, and the cancer overcame him. So It's Dale Lear, born April 13th, 1951, and departed from us 1st of September 2017. So 66 years old. It's a little young for my taste.
Yes.
By all accounts, Dale was a very nice man, very fine gentleman. We never did get a chance to talk to him on the podcast here. I did reach out to him. It turned out to be just about the time of his diagnosis, and he told me that that he had to be a bit choosy with what he committed to do. And boy, was he right. He did not last long. So obviously our thoughts and prayers go out to the Lear family and his friends. I know Rick Adams was a close friend. It's just a sad thing. So, rest in peace, Dale. All right. Well, so moving on from that. Our first link comes from a Martin Wint. I guess this is a YouTube video, which I stupidly just started. So, hello, Martin. So, Martin shows us his environment where he does cross development for the Atari 2600 using his Commodore 64. And he's got a neat little environment. He used the Commodore 64 assembler, and then he loads code, I guess, through the cassette port over to. He's got a StarPath supercharger, which was an item for the Atari 2600, which lets you load games from cassette tape. And so basically, he's like I said, doing cross development with his Atari 2600 plugged into his Commodore 64. So what does it have to do with us? Well, nothing, but it's kind of cool. And there's nothing really stopping you from doing the same kind of thing with, say, a Vectrix, which has a 1689 processor just like the CoCo. Of course, I don't think there's an equivalent to the StarPath supercharger, but there are some multi cards for the Vectrix that allow for downloading over the serial port, I'm pretty sure. So you could do something similar, and I think that'd be a pretty cool display for CoCo Fest. So that's my challenge. So someone take up the challenge. Use your CoCo assembly tools. Use EdTasm to develop code for your Vectrix, and I'm sure we'll come up with some kind of prize for that.
Definitely.
So, all right, very cool. All right, moving on. I think we got a brief mention this just a little bit earlier, but Nick Morentos has gone and done an update to his Pac-Man game. It says Pac-Man is now available as a free download from the link above. This is version 1.1, which is essentially the same as version 1.0 with a new bootloader, a maze palette change, more blue, and a minor speed adjustment in the intermission music playback speed. So he's done a couple of minor updates to the code and then made it available for a free download. So if you're interested in playing Pac-Man on your CoCo 3, you have a couple of options available now, along with the Glenn Hewlett's transcode. Nick's code is not a transcode, but it's still, by all accounts, a pretty good version of the game.
Yeah, it is.
And it's been out a long time. So it definitely was a cool thing when he originally released it. It was definitely well regarded. So if you're a fan of Nick's Pac-Man port, then you should go and check it out. And or if you haven't tried it, you should go and check it out now that you can download it for free. Very cool.
The CoCo 3 is definitely the platform to play Pac-Man.
You think so?
Yeah, I've played Nick's version at different computer shows, and people that aren't familiar with it are really wowed by it. So I think you got a winner with this, or Glenn's version, or Donkey Kong Remix is also another awesome one.
Cool. All right, I'm going to click on the next link, but it's going to start another video. All right, so we've got a game from Jim Gary, one of several this month. This one is a Berserk further update. Let's see. I'm not sure. I guess this is Berserk, like the robot shooting game. I assume this is on the MC-10. And let's see. The Astro date is 3200. You're the last survivor of a small group of Earth people who came to explore the planet Mazia. Sounds pretty cool. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So it looks like a version of the arcade game Berserk, but for the MC-10. So very cool. If you're looking for some extra gameplay on your MC-10, as usual, Jim has your back. So
yes.
I got to check that one out. I've always liked that game. I used to play that on the 2600, actually. It's a fun game.
Nope. All right. So moving on. So this is again for twice.com. I still don't know much about twice.com, but they seem to cover Radio Shack for some reason.
I was thinking the same thing. I've only been out there to cover Radio Shack stuff.
That's funny, but anyway, they have a headline from late August. Independent Radio Shack dealers unleashed by latest bankruptcy. The gist of the story being that the guys so you may not know, but some of the Radio Shacks, a lot of them, of course, were owned by Radio Shack Corporation, but some of the stores were owned as franchise stores. And the franchise guys are still out there in business. And it sounds like some of them, at least, are doing as well as ever, free from the shackles of whatever direction they had to take from corporate Radio Shack. So I guess that's good news for those of us that are, rooting for Radio Shack at some level or fans of at least the Radio Shack we remember from the past. I suspect that some of these independent Radio Shack dealers may be a little more like what we remember Radio Shack being, more likely to be, true electronic stores or that sort of thing. Maybe more friendly to the hobbyist or whatever. I'm kind of just making that up, but it makes sense to me. But anyways, what's out there? Maybe Radio Shack could eventually make a comeback led by their independent franchisees. What do you think?
It'd be nice to see.
Yeah, I can tell you that my first color computer I ever bought was from a Radio Shack franchisee. It was not from a Radio Shack store. And the support I got there was really good. So I'd love to see those guys come back and make a dent in the universe.
All right. Well, let's take our best hopes for them. And what's in them our best hopes, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So maybe there'll be a viable Radio Shack in the future for our grandchildren or something like that. All right, next on the docket, another Jim Gary game. This one is called Pyramid Solitaire. Not really familiar with that type of solitaire, but it looks like it's inspired by a card game, solitaire of some sort. Again, it runs on MD10, semi-graphics mode. Graphics looks pretty cool if you like card games or whatever. Again, if you're looking for more gaming opportunities on the MC10, Jim is your man.
Yeah, I like the the very primitive graphics for the different card types. It's kind of fun to see.
Yeah.
Trying to differentiate a club from a spade, for example.
Right. Pretty amazing that how much mileage you can get out of that. All right. So the next item comes from a Russ Bernhardt. Not really familiar with Russ, but he's got a 3D printing project where he is printing replacement buttons for the old the old style color computer joysticks, the one that I call the Black Beauties. And, it's just a little button, but if yours is gone or broken, which seems to happen more than you might expect, he's got a way to replace them. So I like this kind of 3D printing project because like I said, I'm not a huge fan of 3D printing because of the finish or whatever, and I think it kind of is overhyped. But it is cool when you need to produce something very specific in a very small quantity. It's a good way to get it done. And so I think this is kind of the perfect kind of thing to do for a 3D printing project. Very cool. All right. Let's move on. So we got an announcement from Glenn Hewlett on his blog, a sprite compiler for the TRS-80 Color Computer 3. So sprites are referencing basically moving graphics objects in a 2D graphics environment. And one of the best ways to handle that, obviously you have to do it all in software on the color computer, but just writing software that does it the most straightforward way often is subpar performance. And so the best way to improve that performance is to write custom code for each sprite, and that's typically referred to as compile sprites, even if you're writing it by hand. But in this case, he's working on something where you can basically produce the pictures themselves and run it through a tool that then will write code for you to transition one picture to another or whatever. So it's a cool tool for programming action-oriented games, that sort of thing.
Cool.
Yeah.
I just have to say, Glenn is doing some fantastic stuff. I mean, that blog he keeps updated. It's an excellent read if you haven't checked it out.
Yeah, he does a lot of cool blogging.
Yeah, and we really appreciate releasing these kinds of tools to the community. He's not obligated to do that, but sure happy he did.
Yeah, definitely.
For years, air fresheners have been used to hide unpleasant odors. But until now, your choices have always been wildflowers, potpourri, country spices, citrus, and other floral derivatives. That's all about to change with new Retro Fresh from Jackson & Jackson. Retro Fresh is a walk down memory lane. Each fragrant mist smells like your favorite retro computers. Salmon patties for dinner? Now it's the scent of printer ribbons, Apple IIs, and TRS-80s. Too many cats in the house? Now it's just the scent of heating power supplies, newly opened diskettes, and warm CRTs. Uncle Bob use your bathroom after the chili cook-off? Replace that offensive odor with the aroma of new computers. New Retro Fresh comes in 3 scents. Apple II and TRS-80s, warm power supply and CRTs, and new computer. It's like a VCF in a can. New Retro Fresh. Free yourself from the floral prison of other air fresheners.
Jackson & Jackson is an air freshener company.
Tandy Assembly would like to thank our sponsor, CoCo Talk. CoCo Talk is the nation's leading live talk show about the Tandy color computer, airing live each week on YouTube, with video and audio replays available. Join CoCo Talk to discuss community projects, hardware and software, interviews, reviews, demos, and tutorials. For more details about CoCo Talk, visit cocotalk.live. Thank you to CoCo Talk for being a Tandy Assembly sponsor.
All right. The next item, I'm not sure if it's sad news or not. We got an email to the mailing list, the CoCo mailing list, from Gene Heskett, a longtime contributor there. There's a message from John Turner this morning, and so you got an email from John Turner Sr. And I think we mentioned in the past that there was someone named Little John that kind of produced a lot of activity on the list at one point, and then kind of disappeared, and there were rumors that he had been in poor health, and no one quite knew what had happened to Little John. And so we get this message relayed from John Turner Sr., and basically saying that he's uploading some of his son's designs, making them available. And so that sounds promising in some ways, and get a little bit of a story out of some of it that maybe John had found a girl and kind of gone off with her, whatever. But then someone else was kind of reading a little closer, and maybe the implication was that he had found a girl for a while and then he had passed anyway. So I say it's still not clear what has happened to Little John. The upside here is for those who are interested in Little John's work, is being made available, perhaps at a bit of a slow pace, but being made available for those that want to use it and or build upon it for hardware designs in the color computer world. So anyway, what did you guys make of this? Did you feel like there was a clear answer on what had happened with Little John?
No, I was confused. I wasn't quite sure what to think of that.
Yeah, it could be read multiple ways, but I'm certainly glad that all that data won't be lost, and be interesting to peruse some of that stuff. He had some interesting ideas, and but yeah, it's just been a total mystery how he just vanished one day.
Yeah, so like I said, some of the designs were interesting. It's good that it's been still available in the community for those that are interested in perhaps following up on the work.
Was this the same fellow that had the website Gimme Chip or something like that, or Gimme?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's when I came back into the CoCo scene.
So I was just catching up on this whole message since I'm not currently subscribed to the CoCo list, but I was reading the history. I'm going to take a cynical point of view of this, and maybe this is controversial, but this whole Big John, Little John thing has been going on for years. To me, this is the CoCo version of an urban legend. Never seen these people, don't know who they are. They pop up, they go out on the CoCo list. Maybe they're real, maybe they're not. I don't know, but it just seems like it's someone could be playing a trick, or maybe they're real. I don't know. It just seems so weird to me, and it adds to the whole mystery of this. Like you said, the guy was supposedly not doing very well, and I'm reading here that he ran off with a woman 5 years ago. Whatever. People put all their personal stuff on the CoCo list sometimes, or whatever. That's you get all these different types of people, I guess, and personalities, but it just seems so out of the park for me.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a soap opera. Definitely, some people have taken an interest in it, kind of, I think, from the soap opera perspective over the years of, what happened to this kid or whatever. It definitely, I do feel sad for the John Turner Sr. He's apparently, my guess is from my reading of it is that he has lost his son to some sort of illness. And it's taken some amount of time since that happened for him to try to follow through on what he sees as his son's wishes to make this stuff available. And so, that's admirable and honorable. And, I hope to see more of that produced. With that said, I'm not sure that the designs are particularly innovative or useful. The things like ROM cartridge boards and that sort of thing, they're not particularly hard to come by, those designs. But it might be something that inspires someone. Maybe we get a new I want to say Ed Turner. No, Zipster. Maybe we get a new Zipster out of this. I can't place the name. What is Ed's last name?
Snyder.
Maybe we get a new Ed Snyder out of this from someone who picks up on Little John's work and learns how to use the tools or whatever. That might be a nice outcome. But I am with you. There is a little bit of it's kind of a weird story to have in the community. I guess when you have a community that's been around this long, you're going to have people that kind of come in and out of it. At least it's not a Steven Disney story. How's that for an old reference?
Take the money and run.
Yeah, now we have to have a Steven Disney segment at some point. Just to describe
let's get our shovels and really dig deep on some old dirt, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this is all going to end up in the Time Life Mysteries of the CoCo.
Oh, Lord. Well, anyway, So there it is. If you are someone who's been concerned about the fate of little John, there is some information out there on the web for you to look into. Maybe you can follow up on it. If someone figures out the actual fixed story for sure, maybe they can contact us and fill us in exactly what has happened, because what we have now is still a bit unclear and just sort of adds to the mystery. All right. So moving on. This is another Jim Gary video, but in this case, it's not his code running, but it's an MC10 demo program that from Radio Shack, I guess, that Ron Delvaux discovered in his garage and has made available on the archive. So for those of you who are fans of the CoCo Talk, they've added a regular segment they call Ron's Garage or something like that. And so Ron Delvaux spends part of each episode kind of piddling through his garage and finding stuff that he's CoCo related stuff and holding it up and saying, "Hey, have you ever seen this?" That sort of thing. I guess part of one of those segments, or maybe just separately, he found an MC10 demo tape, and it's got some kind of little shoot 'em up style game. I'm not sure how much fun it is, but it's something to look at. So if it looks interesting to you, you might try to find it. It's supposed to be in the archive now, so you might go looking for that.
Cool.
All right. Moving on. We have an article from Salon.com from L. O'Brien. I don't know who that is, but he said, "I had to learn assembly language to truly understand my grandfather." So he didn't process the world like the rest of us. So
to be saying about us.
Yeah, well, that's probably what people say about us at some point. Anyway, so she kind of talks about this person and her family member that maybe was a little difficult to relate to. And at some point, she went through the process of learning how to program in assembly language and feels that she gained some level of understanding of that person, which is kind of nice. I hope that somebody that doesn't understand me would take that that amount of effort. Learning assembly language to understand somebody, I mean, that's love, man. That's a lot of work. But anyway, it might be worth a read for some of you. Take a look, see if it's meaningful to you. What do you think, Neil?
Maybe somebody will try to reverse engineer Farfall one day. I really understand.
Try to find all the Easter eggs. Oh, Lord. That's what I should do. Start a rumor that there's a bunch of Easter eggs in Farfall and offer a prize or something if you could figure them out. Maybe there is. Anyway, moving on. We've got a link from Gamma Sutra. It says, how and why we ported Shenzhen Solitaire to MS-DOS. Again, not really a CoCo thing, but it's kind of an interesting... I guess this Shenzhen Solitaire is a more modern game, I guess, for the PC. I don't know. They've got a Kickstarter on this port to DOS that I actually backed. So I'm hoping to get a copy. We'll see how that turns out. But basically, they took a modern PC game and went through the trouble of porting it back to DOS using Boiling C++ running in DOSBox. And the article is about, kind of how they went about demaking the assets, changing to different graphics resolutions and dealing with the limitations of going to the VGA from, modern style graphics or whatever. Not exactly CoCo related, but it's kind of in the same ballpark of what you'd have to go through if you tried to do something similar targeting the CoCo. With CoCo 3. So I thought it was an interesting read. Maybe you will too.
Run that on your Tandy 1000 with VGA.
Well, there you go. All right. Let's see. Next up. Okay. It's a Hackaday.io link. project on Hackaday. Dragon shared memory. Clearly not a native English speaker. It says board for share data and or programs between a PC and Dragon computer throw expansion bus. Tomu Capo. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that anywhere near correct. I'm not even sure what language we're dealing with.
The 4 is silent.
Anyway, it's kind of a cool looking project. From what I can make of it, is it's a plug-in board for the Dragon, or I guess it could be for CoCo. And he's got another board that plugs into a PC over USB, and then gives you the opportunity to write to the Dragon's memory from your PC. So you can do cross-development that way. Kind of not unlike that Commodore 64 to Atari 2600 thing we talked about earlier.
Yeah, cool.
So he's got the Eagle schematics available. Though it says Eagle schematics without PCB, so I'm not really sure what that's useful for. But anyway, you may be able to do something cool with that. It's a neat project. I always like to see people working on their CoCos and Dragons and doing stuff. So check it out. Maybe it'll inspire you. Maybe Voicey can review it on his flight to Copenhagen or whatever. Produce something for us. All right. So this is a CoCo mailing list thing. It actually harkens back to the VCF Midwest event from the mail messages from John Mark Mobley. And he had a link to the Computer Festival badge for VCF. They had a badge there that was a single board computer kit based on the 6502. And so he's kind of pointed out and then suggested maybe we could do something with a 6809 for CoCo Fest or something. Of course, it immediately spiraled out of control. Because Salvador Garcia says, first question would be, would the badge have to use vintage components? Which then I think I immediately answered yes. And so that right there started a big divide of the whole community. Does the badge have to have vintage components or not? Ed Snyder wanted to do a version with some kind of display off of eBay or whatever that's designed for Arduino or something. I don't know. Do your badge. If you want to do your badge, you don't have to please me. Do a badge with whatever you want on it. But my vote would be to use the vintage components because that's just how I kind of like it. And I don't see why you need anything beyond that just to have a badge that blinks LEDs or something. But you want to do something different, do your own thing. Play your own pipe, man.
There you go.
So what do you think, Neil?
It's great. I was actually thinking about we have something similar. Actually, you gave it to me. That's Simon 6809.
Oh yeah, Simon 6809.
That would kind of get us there, right? Close.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could design a new board. The Simon 6809 is, it's a neat little board, but it's not, it's not rocket science, shall we say. It's pretty similar to any number of other single board computers. I guess that's my point, though, is the Simon 6809 is basically all vintage components except for the USB serial chip. And it's a lot of fun to play with. So, I don't think you need to add, a huge FPGA or something and VGA graphics to it to make it worthwhile to play with. But, again, float your own boat, do whatever.
Yeah, it's nice to keep it period correct.
I have a suggestion.
Go ahead.
I'd like to see the Kipper bus used on it.
And whatever happened to Kip's PCBs? Did he ever actually ship any of those out? I don't know if he did or not.
Like a great badge, though.
I haven't heard.
It might be, and if you were doing those as a badge, then that'd be a great reason to sit the night before of CoCo Fest and slaughtered them in the lobby there at Heron Point or at the hotel there.
Yeah.
That'd be cool, huh? All right. Well, moving on. So here's a deep link. Your load is too heavy. Zork deep reading, right? So apparently,
that's what
yeah. So apparently, somebody figured out that there's a bug in Zork that relates to when your load gets too high. And basically what it amounts to is the way they calculate how much you're carrying has a bit of a random component to it, at least once it gets to be a certain amount. And so I think I've actually done this and never thought much about it. But if you're playing Zork and you try to pick something up, sometimes it'll say, you're holding too many things. And then you say, take, like you say, take sword, you're holding too many things, take sword, you're holding too many things, take sword, taken. And so somebody figured out that this was possible, and they went into the Zork, the Z machine code for it, and figured out where this bug was and how it worked. I don't know. I think that's kind of cool, finding weird bugs in old software. And if you do, then you might enjoy reading this little blog post.
Yeah, it's cool.
So
it was a cool thing.
If you use OS 9 Level 2 as your CoCo's primary operating system, you know its power and flexibility. Word processing, spreadsheets, program development. But what about tools that help you manage your day-to-day tasks? Help is here with Presto Partner. Presto Partner is an integrated desktop calendar, notepad, phone book, and more. Schedule important events on the calendar and be reminded of these events automatically. Quickly enter notes that are saved to disk and fully searchable. Get a hard copy of any note. Plus, you can perform decimal and hexadecimal calculations in any note. The integrated phone book allows you to quickly store names, addresses, and phone numbers. Search by any field. You can even have Presto Partner dial the number for you with a Hayes or Hayes-compatible modem. Presto Partner also allows you to define macro keys that can perform up to 10 OS 9 commands. Presto Partner is a RAM resident utility. It opens in its own window. Just switch to it with the clear key anytime you need it. Just how useful is Presto Partner? Imagine you're typing a letter on your CoCo when the phone rings. The call is for your spouse, but they're not home. No problem. Press clear to get to Presto Partner and Alt down to create a new note. Enter the message for your spouse, then press clear to return to your letter writer. Say you're working on a program. You need to figure out the ASCII value of A multiplied by 5. Simply press the clear key to bring up Presto Partner. Press Alt down to open a note and type in the calculation. The result is displayed instantly in the note. While working on a spreadsheet, your CoCo starts beeping and flashing red. You press clear to bring up Presto Partner, and you see that your child has a dental appointment at 11:30. You need to call the school to let them know about it. So you press Alt-P to open the phone book. You look up the number, and Presto Partner dials the number for you. Presto Partner is a complete desk inside your computer. Find out why so many describe Presto Partner as invaluable, a must-have, simply the most useful tool for my CoCo. Presto Partner requires a 512K CoCo 3 with OS 9 Level 2 and at least one disk drive. Presto Partner by Keith Alfonso, distributed by CoCo Pro.
Tandy Assembly would like to thank our sponsor, CoCo VGA, creator of the FPGA-based hardware enhancement for Motorola 6847 VDG-based microcomputers, such as the TRS-80 color computer. CoCo VGA adds VGA output to early model CoCos. It adds true lowercase, multiple artifact modes, scanline emulation, and a customizable palette in addition to other features. For more details about CoCo VGA, visit www.cocovga.com. Thank you to CoCo VGA for being a Tandy Assembly sponsor.
All right, so moving on, we got a post from a William Schaub. Does that sound right? Schaub. Says he's been learning 6809 assembly for a few weeks straight. Excuse me, mostly on weekends and downtime, blah, blah, blah. Real little demo that basically just prints the screen. Not that big a deal. But he's made his code available on GitHub. Those not familiar, GitHub is a way to distribute code that's open source and available for other people to look at or whatever. But he's got his 6809 code available, and if you go on GitHub, you can take a look and see what he's up to, and check it out. Maybe you can learn 6809 assembly along with him. Help you understand your grandfather.
That was pretty cool, though. I like how he's posted, the output of some of his programs. So kind of neat.
No, very cool. All right, moving on. This is the BBC News link. We get around here. So, Voyager 1 at 40. Voyager 1, of course, is a space probe launched to explore the outer reaches of our solar system. I think at this point it's actually gone out into interstellar space. I'm not sure how interstellar space differs from solar system space, but other than there's not another planet in the way, but
yeah, there's more nothing.
There's a lot more nothing.
A lot more nothing, yeah.
But anyway, apparently scientists are amazed that this 40-year-old system still works. And I guess on the one hand, maybe that's, I guess we all would be a bit amazed. But on the other hand, it's like, well, if you talk to some retro computer guys, well, we've all got 40-year-old systems that work. So, I guess, we don't send them out into space where you can't work on them and you can't touch them or whatever. But for me, it's just not that surprising that a 40-year-old machine was to be working out in space where nobody touches it. It's usually when somebody touches my machines that they stop working.
Yeah.
So, anyway. All right. Well, there's the thoughts on that. So, what do you think?
We have 40-year-old tapes that are still reading.
Yeah. All right, moving on. We have another link from Jim Gary. Another MC10 game. Not really sure the origin of this one. He's writing it for the MC10. Not sure how to pronounce this one. Adanarjawat. I have no idea. It kind of looks like some sort of maze game. I'm not really sure what the objective is, but definitely seems to involve mazes. But again, if you're looking for some more entertainment for your MC10, again, Jim's got your back. So you go figure out this Adanarjawat and see if it tickles your fancy. All right. So, next link comes from Rightveld, a man who likes his name so much he uses it twice. So he says, finally got a chance to upload a bunch of games, including French versions of Mud Pies, Puyan, Time Bandit, Shenanigans, etc. I guess that's what that's supposed to be. So, anyway, Mr. Rightveld, I guess, does he live in Quebec? Is he French?
No, he's actually not too far from me.
Okay,
he's in Ontario.
Yeah, well, you're not that far from Quebec, so
no, not too far to go over for some poutine,
Yeah. Watch what you say there. So I suppose probably it's not too surprising that he might have a source for French CoCo software. Anyway, he seems to have found some and has uploaded it to the archive, some French derivatives, French variations on those games. So pretty cool. So if you're looking for some French CoCo software, go check that out.
Ouch. Back in the day when I used to go to Radio Shack, there was French games from the stuff that Radio Shack used to sell, like those the spelling game on cassette. Forget the name of that game now. There definitely was French versions of a lot of educational software. Now I don't know about the other games, but that's cool that he found them.
Yeah, from what I gathered, these were hacked. These were the original English versions that they had changed to French.
Oh, okay. No, the ones I saw at Radio Shack, these were definitely official. I mean, even the manuals were in French.
Yeah. I would imagine that was the case, but
that's
Rightveld's games. When he's talking about it, they were hacked versions, so kind of neat.
I didn't know that.
Very cool. All right, moving on. Phil Harvey Smith announces on the Facebook Dragon group, says, "It was great pleasure that I would like to announce the availability of the Dragon MMC board." And so basically, Phil, like I said, Phil's a kind of a Mark Marlette or Ed Snyder kind of guy in the Dragon world, where he produces a lot of hardware. I think he does a lot of retro computing for different. So maybe he's well, anyway, he does a lot of hardware over on the other side of the pond. I think he's done some stuff for like the Acorn Atom and some other systems, but could be wrong. But I'm pretty sure he gets around. Anyway, he's producing a board that is at least somewhat similar in concept to the CoCo SDC card, where he's going to be able to read SD cards or MMC cards, I guess, and load software off of them onto the Dragon. It's not exactly the same. It's going to be a bit different, but I'm not sure he's really emulating a floppy drive at all. So that's kind of a big difference. But he has got options for loading like tape-based programs through the system and that sort of stuff. Anyway, I've ordered one. I'm hoping to get it and have some good times with it. Looking forward to getting it. I know Neil ordered one. So particularly if you've got a Dragon or if you're looking for other cool hardware for your CoCo, then you may want to check this out and see about getting a Dragon MMC card for yourself. What do you think, Neil?
I'm pretty excited to try it out. What had me was that it can stream cassette files. That's kind of a neat feature.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, moving on. This link is another link to Glenn Hewlett's blog. In this case, he's done a series on optimizing 6809 assembly code. And basically, he's gone through a number of small or interesting examples of things like, certain instructions that are similar, but one version is a byte shorter or a cycle faster than the other. Like LDX is a byte shorter and a cycle faster than LDY. He's got a lot of little tips and tricks like that, some of which will require you to some of them are simple where you can basically substitute one instruction for another. Some of them are a little more complicated where you need to restructure some code to be able to take advantage of the optimizations. But he talks about things like stack blasting and self-modifying code, unrolling loops, whatever. If you're aspiring 6809 assembler programs, but you're not so confident on your skills that you think you're getting full performance from the system, you may want to check out his blog and see what sort of recommendations he's making. All right, very cool. Next link is from Carlos Camacho, complaining of yellow tinge on the CoCo 2. And apparently it's a problem that a number of CoCo 2s develop, where you end up with a kind of a bit of a tinted yellow bar on the left side of the screen. And so what it has to do with, apparently, is the special circuit that was added to the CoCo 2 to enable artifact graphics mode. Sometimes fires a bit strangely due to breakdowns in the components. And so sometimes you need to replace those components or else you end up with this little yellow tinge. So if you have a CoCo 2 that is experiencing that sort of problem, you may want to follow this link and see what sort of fixes are available there. And there's some write-up there from Ed Snyder, and where he explains, some of what's going on there. You ever see this yellow tinge?
I haven't, but I think they ought to call it yellow fever.
Yellow fever. All right, that's probably a good word for it. Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen it on one or two systems. Not sure how common it is, but it's something that does happen to some people. So it's worth being aware of.
Yeah, definitely. I haven't run into that either, but good to know it's understood.
All right. One more Jim Gary game. This one's an update on Flywheel. And Flywheel seems to be a driving game, a racing style game for the MC10. And almost looks like Pole Position. So, again, if you're looking for some ways to entertain yourself involving your entertainment, Jim is definitely putting some stuff out for you to look at.
You're the man, Jim.
Check that out. All right. So this one was a video posted to the MC10 Facebook group. Not a lot of detail from someone, Jerry Young. Not really familiar with Jerry, but says he's working on my adventure clone. And so he's posted what appears to be a video of an MC10 playing a clone of the Atari Adventure game from the Atari 2600. So I'm not sure how far along he's gotten. I hope he sticks with it. Adventure obviously was a cool and classic game from the Atari 2600 world. It'd be cool to have that in our chest of capabilities. What do you think, Neil? You like Adventure?
Yeah, definitely. That's an iconic game. It'd be nice to have that on the MC10.
Yeah. Yeah. The guy that wrote that, who was that Atari Adventure author? Warren Robinette. Yeah, he's a professor at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, which means he probably lives close enough I could go knock on his door tonight. But I have not been able to establish contact with him. Would definitely like to talk to him and just to shoot the shit about games and stuff. But I'm sure he has no interest in talking to me. But
well, you never know. I might be able to get him on the podcast.
That'd be kind of cool. But yeah, if we could get somebody to actually clone an adventure, maybe I could have a real excuse to go knock on Warren's door and say, "Hey, we want to talk to you." That'd be cool.
Yeah,
for sure.
All right, let's see. Well, moving on. Next is from Steve Trowbridge, talking about his color computer community resources, and basically he's talking about his I'mACoconut.com page, where he has collected a variety of links to CoCo related stuff from people's blogs and information about emulators and links to, well, of course, to the podcast and to his CoCo Talk stuff, YouTube videos, whatever else. Anyway, if you're lacking in information, or if you're not sure where to look for more information about the CoCo online, then you may want to start at this link in the show notes and follow through and take a look at some of what Steve has accumulated, and maybe it'll help you find more CoCo information. Very cool, huh?
Yes.
All right. We got one more. This is a late-breaking link, at least I just saw it today. It comes from Mark McDougall. Mark likes to work on a variety of ports of stuff, sometimes to other systems or whatever else. He's been working on porting Asteroids to the Apple II GS and to the CoCo 3, and which is hard enough just because of course Asteroids is a vector graphics game, and those systems use vector graphics. Anyway, I guess related to that project, he became involved in some work with the old arcade Star Wars game. Which, among other things, it is a vector graphics game, but it also uses a 6809 processor. And so he's been doing some work related to that, where he's essentially producing some sort of software development kit for helping people produce new software for the arcade hardware there. So not really a CoCo project per se, but it's a 6809 project. And so it could be useful for learning more about how to use the 6809. Who knows? Maybe someday they'll port the Star Wars arcade game over to some version of the CoCo 3. That'd be cool.
That would.
So I don't know. Not entirely CoCo related, but I think you might enjoy checking it out. So
it's definitely cool.
There you go.
Now, if we could only get like Dynacalc to run on the arcade board.
That would be hilarious.
Yeah.
Or OS 9 with its ease of use.
That's right. Well, you'd need that.
Oh, Lord. All right. Yeah, so that's the end of our news segment. So we're going to take another little break, and then we'll be back with some feedback.
New from Intelligent Devices. Break the 64K barrier with our 128K RAM board. Easy solderless installation and all of the software is included. You get Big Basic that enhances Color Computer Basic with simple commands, and it's fully transparent to existing software. It revolutionizes graphics and animation. Key clear up to 54 graphics pages. Load 3 full-size basic programs in memory, or create a 90K super program. And for OS 9 users, Fast09 software is included. Fast09 adds a new RBF device /V to OS 9. It works just like D0 and D1, but 10 times faster. Move your commands directory to /V and execute commands in less than a second. The 128K RAM board with Big Basic and Fast09 is just $139.95 from Intelligent Devices. And coming soon, 512K RAM board. Intelligent users use Intelligent Devices.
Specify CoCo 1 DEF board or CoCo 2 when ordering. Intelligent Devices, Mountain View, California.
Tandy Assembly would like to thank our sponsor, Retro Innovations. Retro Innovations is a producer and designer of Tandy color computer and general system products. Producer of the CoCo Flash Multi-ROM Emulator. The CoCo Flash offers 8 megabytes of ROM storage and supports large ROM images. It also includes a built-in Orchestra 90 compatible music synthesizer. For more details on this product and others, visit www.goforretro.com. That's www.go4retro.com. Thank you, Retro Innovations, for being a Tandy Assembly sponsor.
All right, CoCo Crewers, now we're back with some feedback. I'm not drunk, I swear. Just can't talk, that's all. But I'm doing the best I can. All right, so we did get a couple of feedback items from the last episode, episode 27. First feedback item we have, of course, from L. Curtis Boyle. He's responding to our topic of, does it make sense to put a 6309 in a CoCo 1 or 2? So he makes the point, yes, it does run cooler than the 6809. So the 6309 runs cooler than the 6809. He also says, I think they're easier or cheaper to find than the 6809, but not by much. So I suppose that's possible. It's still strange for me to get my head around the 6309 being cheaper or easier to find than the 6809, but I guess it's, people are finding that. Maybe it depends on where you look. I don't know. I say the talk on CoCo Talk was, well, it doesn't hurt anything or whatever. Well, as long as you're not clipping the pins off the 6809 when you're taking it out, then it doesn't hurt anything, I guess. If you already had a socketed 6809, then sure, pull it out of the socket, pop a 6309 in, and you're fine. I do hate the thought of people cutting 6809s out of, perfectly working 6809s out of CoCo 1s or 2s or whatever, probably 2s, and replacing them with a 6309 when they probably don't have any software that will run on the 6309, or at least that takes advantage of it. But, I mean, again, it's your chip, your CoCo, do what you like. I have heard that David Ladd and Curtis are working to put more 6309 code into the level 1 Nitrous 9 port for the 6309 build. So it might become more worthwhile. And of course, there are some pieces you can write your own new software that takes advantage of the 6309, or you can use like Ed Snyder's media players he's been working on that takes advantage of the 6309. So, I mean, there is stuff out there. Again, for me, I wouldn't let it affect the value of the price I paid for a new CoCo or a CoCo off of eBay. But, maybe it's worth it to you. Any thoughts?
I think you summed it up nicely. I agree with you on the 6309.
Yeah.
It's sacrilege to cut those chips out, I think.
Yeah, so please don't cut any chips out. But, if you have to, I guess you have to, but try not to. All right. Well, moving on. So we have a feedback from Per Surratt. We had a comment from him in the last one about how they had redone some work to use for the Orchestra 90 software running on Ed Snyder's CoCo DAC 16 on a Dragon. It was a little difficult to understand. I've reproduced what he sent me in the show notes. I think it's still a little difficult to understand. I think I get what he's saying. I'm not sure I can enunciate it. but basically, they found some sort of trick that they're able to play that they have to play when they're using the CoCo DAC 16 with an MPI. They have to do things a little bit differently on the Dragon. Basically, the point being, you can use your CoCo DAC 16 with the Orc 90 stuff on the Dragon. You just have to have the right software. So, is that clear enough? Definitely. Yeah. Well, anyway, I hope the message is out. There it is in the show notes. If you're wondering what's going on, try to read it in the show notes. And if you just can't figure it out, send us a note, or better yet, send Per a note. And I'm sure we can get an explanation for you one way or another. All right. Well, that's our feedback section for this month. So we're going to take another quick break, and then we'll be back with the rest of the show.
This month, Radio Shack features great bargains on TRS-80 computer system furniture. The new deluxe terminal stand is perfect for the Model 2, 12, and 16. It rolls easily on locking casters and has 3 height adjustments of 26, 27, and 28 inches. Normally $179, it's available this month for just $129. Our budget computer table is perfect for the Model 3 or color computer. Its 48 by 24 surface affords plenty of room without taking too much space. Normally $69.95, it's just $54.95 this month at Radio Shack. Our popular desktop printer shelf is just $19.99. It features walnut veneered side panels and allows tractor feed paper underneath. It works great with the DMP 100 and 200. See these and other computer furniture bargains only at Radio Shack, a Tandy company. Tandy Assembly would like to thank our sponsor, SidTrug, the Sydney TRS-80 MS-DOS Users Group, a group of computer enthusiasts meeting on a regular basis to discuss hardware and software issues. Their origins are with the Tandy TRS-80 and compatible System 80 range of computers. SidTrug meets at Regents Park Community Centre Hall, 1 Amy Street, Regents Park, New South Wales 2143. For more details about SidTrug, visit sidtrug.org. That's SYDTRUG.org. Thank you to SidTrug for being a Tandy Assembly sponsor.
All right, CoCo Cruisers, welcome back. We're going to have the first of several host discussions this month. We're going to let you experience our lovely personalities, and especially since we got Boise, who's the loveliest of all, to join us. We're going to talk about a few different topics this month. So one thing that I thought was worth addressing, some might see it as an elephant in the room, so I figured it was worth going ahead and just talking about it right out, is so now there's another CoCo podcast. How do we feel about that? Is it a big deal? Are they competition? Is it a challenge? Or is it more the merrier? I know probably have had some level of mixed feelings about it myself before working to where I am now. I think maybe you guys have had similar discussions with yourself, shall we say? So where are we? What do you think? Are we all right with CoCo Talk? Any problems there?
I have no problem with it. I think it's more the merrier, and this just seems like a natural extension of what Steve's been doing with his YouTube channel. So I think it just gives people one more outlet for their hobby. So I think it's good in that respect.
Yeah, I do think it's kind of funny. One of the the complaints about our show that has been repeated more than once from various sources is, it's just so long. And we do average, probably 3 hours, give or take. But, so now CoCo Talk is every week, and every week they're averaging about 3 hours. so that's 4 times as much talk, give or take. So it's kind of funny that the big complaint was that we were too long, and they're producing, quite a bit more content, really. But I'm with you. I think that's good. I think it's, part of the reason I started agitating and trying to produce as much content on blogs and projects and whatever a few years back, because I was afraid the hobby was dying and that there was not enough content or whatever. And if you'd have told me, like Farfall dates from like 2012, if you'd have told me in 2012 that in a few years there'd be 2 CoCo podcasts, you just clicking around, going strong, I would not have believed it. And so I'm just as happy as I can be to see that there's people who want to get out and produce content for other people to consume. Granted, there's some people who are probably satisfying their own need to talk a bit, but still, there's good content being produced and good projects and stuff that's fun to listen to and fun to see what other people are doing. And so yeah, I think there's room for both. It helps that we have 2 different styles. I think our show is a little more, buttoned down maybe, or a little more prepared in advance, whereas theirs is a little more freeform and who's available to talk about whatever. It's 2 different styles. I think different people have different interests and different kind of styles they'd like to listen to, or even at different times. And I think it's good that both shows exist. And it's a pretty big development for us. I mean, like the Commodore 64 doesn't seem to be able to produce a podcast. At least I only see one out there.
That's crazy. I mean, you think the Commodore 64 would have like 8 of them,
You would think.
Yeah, for a small community. I mean, we hear this all the time. You hear it at VCF that even though there are other larger groups, they don't have there doesn't seem to be a lot of energy, or they always talk about our community as always doing something, always generating traffic on their lists and, and the podcasts, of course. So I think it's a sign of a good, healthy community.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that the CoCo Crew podcast is analogous to, well, let me put it this way. It is the NPR's All Things Considered of the CoCo world. Right?
Well, I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah, that's how I mean it. That's not to say that Steve's podcast isn't similar. I mean, I enjoy it. I've sat in a few times on it. But, having been here doing this now, this is the 28th episode that we're doing right now. That's been a long time. I mean, we're over 2 years now, John?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So
the funny thing is, the CoCo Talk now has almost as many episodes.
That's right. Cranking them out.
I might call them the Jerry Springer of the CoCo community. I'm just joking, Steve. No, of course not. No, they are obviously more faster paced than the CoCo Crew, but that's okay. The variety, the fact that they focus on a lot more people at the same time. It's almost like a little mini CoCo Fest every weekend that they do. So it's a lot different, I think, than the CoCo Crew.
Yeah. So, like I said, I think it's amazing that we have a market for both. That we have people who want to consume both shows. Both shows seem to be having a pretty good success. So, I mean, I don't think they're hurting us. And if we're hurting them, well, we were here first. So, So I mean, so just in case anyone's out there wondering whether we have any sore feelings or bad intention or whatever, we don't. And one thing that's important to us is the Tandy Assembly, and Steve and his show have definitely pushed Tandy Assembly as hard as anyone. Steve is going to be doing some live streaming for us at Tandy Assembly, so definitely supporting the cause. So yeah, I think we're all friends. I think we're all on the same page and all working together.
Oh yeah.
And we're just producing content for people in a couple of different ways, the product of different sets of minds, and that's all there is.
And Steve has been a champion and plugged our show on his shows. So
definitely.
We appreciate that.
Yep. And for what it's worth, I mean, there's one, I was listening to his shows regularly, and I have been. I tend to have been catching them on YouTube, but YouTube, they've got that YouTube Red, I guess. It gives you some different capabilities, but at least on my phone, without the YouTube Red, watching on YouTube is kind of a problem because I can't surf the web or do anything else. I have to leave it on YouTube while it plays. So the fact that they've switched to a podcast format probably makes it easier for me. Until fairly recently, they hadn't quite caught up with all the episodes, but now that they're going to start catching up, I might be catching up more as a podcast than instead of YouTube. But so it might make my life better, so I can catch it as a podcast and still surf the web while I listen.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'd rather the audio is a big help. So good addition.
Yeah, it take less bandwidth as well if you're driving.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I think that's addressed it. We, like I said, we're not so angry about anything. We're perfectly happy to have the CoCo Talkers out there doing their thing every week. And I hope they're perfectly happily listening to us every month. And I think they are. And, I think it's a sign of a strong community. So good thing. Very exciting. All right. Well, let's close this one out.
To thank our sponsor, The Right Stuff, producer of myriad products for the TRS-80 Models 1, 3, 4, Model 100, and Color Computer. The Fred Hard Drive Emulator, high-res graphics boards, memory upgrade kits, cables, adapters, and more. To see these and other products, visit ianmav, that's IANMAV, .customer.netspace.net.au/TRS-80. Thank you to The Right Stuff for being a Tandy Assembly sponsor.
All right, welcome back, CoCo Cruisers. We've got a treat for you today. We have an interview with someone he's from the community, or depending on your perspective, he's a budding community media star. Been doing some technical talk over on the CoCo Talk YouTube stuff and now podcast. It's been a part of the community for I think for a long time, although I didn't recognize his name until the past few years, so maybe he was a bit of a lurker. But anyway, we'll be talking today to David Ladd. Hello, Mr. Ladd. How are you?
Hello, John and Mike. I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Good. And as you mentioned, Mike Rowan is joining us. Neil is otherwise occupied and will not be joining us. So for anyone that is only listening to the Neil sections of the podcast, you may want to fast forward. All right. Well, David, so why don't you start us off? Give us kind of your CoCo background. Kind of tell us, how you got started with the CoCo and how, beyond that, how you got involved with kind of the community at large.
Well, I got started with the CoCo back in, probably 84, 85, when I got a CoCo 2 with 64K of RAM, a multi-pack, some cartridges, and the deluxe RS-232 pack for Christmas. And I had a heyday.
Yeah.
So it was a good Christmas.
Yeah. So just for the audience sake, can you give us some rough guideline about vaguely how old you are, or just tell us outright, whichever you feel better about?
Well, at that time I would have been 12, 13, because I can't remember for sure if it was 84 or 85 when I got the CoCo 2. So,
okay,
that was,
cool.
That's a long time ago.
Cool. Well, if you were 45 then and bought yourself that for Christmas, it'd be sort of a different story. I'm sure you understand.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, go ahead. Sorry I interrupted.
Oh, no problem. So at that point, I pretty much wasn't part of any clubs at that time, so I was just pretty much messing with the stuff, learning basic. And then for my birthday, which came a few months later, my parents got me the FD 501. And I think the DMP 110 printer, which I have to say is one of the most loudest printers I ever used for the CoCo. But yeah, I used that for quite a long time. I think I got the CoCo 3 in 87, 88.
Cool.
So, and then I didn't get the monitor until 89, I think.
Just in time for them to discontinue it.
Yeah, pretty much, unfortunately.
So was that your first computer, or did you have other computing devices in your life before that?
No, actually, the Color Computer 2 was my very first one. Between the CoCo 2 and the CoCo 3, from my math teacher, I actually acquired a VIC-20. And the 1540 floppy drive and the tape drive.
Ooh, which was faster?
Well, the CoCo was obviously faster. But, I started with the CoCo, so therefore it was, my favorite, because I obviously didn't keep the VIC-20. So,
right.
After I graduated high school, I went into computer tech school to went through classes for programming and electrical diagnosis for computer hardware. And after that point, I pretty much was a PC technician for a long time and kind of got out of the CoCo for a few years. I think it was probably the late 90s is when I got out. And in between that time, before that, though, I'd gotten an MM1. So,
so you were still pretty serious then.
Well, yeah, up until, for service stuff and things like that, it was Windows. So it was pretty much, PC and all that stuff later. So it wasn't until, the last, I'd say probably 10 years, I've dug my stuff out and been getting back into stuff. I was at a few CoCo Fests back in the mid 90s. before, what was it, 2016? So before that, I think the last time I was at a CoCo Fest was 1997.
Oh.
Well,
that was before my first one, so.
Yeah. So I've been to a few. We had a group at that last one that were, I think we were called Budgetware at that time, I believe. I don't remember 100%. But there was one of us that was selling some CoCo stuff. I had a MM1 game that was a clone of Chain Reaction. I think I called it Atomic Grid Warfare, but
awesome.
But as far as stuff like doing now, the 2016 for the CoCo Fest was the first time I'd been back for almost 20 years.
Yeah,
it's been actually 19 years. So
what brought you back then?
One of the people that I had gone to the fest back in 97 had approached me and said something in 2016 if I might be interested in going to the fest. And I was like, I haven't done that for a long time. Sure. So, and then of course it just happened to be that was the the best attendance they had in that 19 years, I think is what someone said. Is that right?
Probably. It certainly has been in a long time.
That was a good year.
So, and I had fun. That was the first time I met most of the people that I'd only talked to on IRC, which would include you, John, and William. I believe it's Assel. Is that correct?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Brett Gordon and I hadn't seen any of Steve Strobridge's videos before that, so I met him, and then after that, it's at the fest. So after that is when I started talking to him, and then we started doing gaming, and then of course just this, right before this year's CoCo Fest is when we decided to just do the simple group chats with the video for live streaming. So I was like, sure, why not? I've never done anything like that before, and I've been having fun. So
yeah. Well, sometimes I feel bad. They kind of rough on you.
Brutal.
Well,
you have to have some thick skin with those guys. Huh? They kind of think like they like to tease.
Well, sometimes you either just have to accept it or just get angry, and I don't like being angry, so
I think that's well intended, but they do get they do pile on a little thick, I think, sometimes, don't you?
Well, sometimes, but as people know, it's not meant to be mean. It's just they mean well. So
sure. No, it's good that you recognize that. So as the weeks have worn on there or gone on with the CoCo Talk, and it's grown or whatever, and Steve started to spread it out to where it kind of has its own kind of segments or whatever. You and I guess you and Curtis kind of share the tech segment there. Did that come about? So did Steve talk to you about that, or did that just sort of roll out just because of the kind of content that you've been providing? Or
yeah, I think it pretty much just rolled out because Curtis talked about more of the OS 9 stuff and some of the things that he'd been doing, and then of course with me here lately breaking stuff like crazy all over the place. It's like it just sort of fell in that way. So
right. Well, so I guess from listening to that show, and it sounds like the stuff you've been breaking kind of fits into two major categories, and maybe it's really one major category, but it sounds like two major categories is you're finding problems with emulators, and you're finding problems related to the floppy drive, which of course is probably problems with emulators related to the floppy drive. So that's why I say it's really one thing, but maybe it's two. Do you want to give any highlights on the sort of problems you've been finding with emulators?
Well, sure. The big one, which, I didn't really feel was really big until after I ran into a data corruption issue, which was with MAME. And the problem at first arose when I was trying to do something that, for me seemed normal. I was trying to copy a utility from one disk image that I had to another disk image. So it wasn't like doing anything out of the ordinary. It was boot up off of Nitrous 9, mount the other disk image, and copy a file over, and Nitrous 9 crashed. And I thought that was kind of weird. At first, I thought it might have been because it was a new branch of Nitrous 9 for some of the for the level 1 for the 6309 stuff. And so I thought, well, okay, maybe that's it. And so I tried the 6809 version, and it did the same thing, which made me go, okay, this can't be right. So I went and did this. Yeah, it should copy no problem. And so I got my CoCo SDC, put the same disk images onto the CoCo SDC, and fired up the real hardware and did the same thing, no issues. So I'm like, okay, so it's not Nitrous 9. So I kind of sat on the issue because I was doing different floppy stuff with getting extra sectors per track. And so I started doing some stuff with the emulators in which ones could do what and how. And that's when I realized when I was doing some stuff that my disk image was corrupted when I was copying files when it wasn't crashing between the two. And so before I was going to report it, Curtis said something that I should check to see if I can duplicate the behavior in Disk Basic. Because one, that's the easiest that most people that don't know anything about OS 9 would be able to duplicate it. And when I did a dir drive 0 and then did a dir drive 1, I got the same directory that was on drive 0.
Right.
And I sat there and looked at that, and then I waited until you heard the drive motor shut off because MAME emulates making the drive noises. And so then I did a dir 1, then a dir 0, all on the same line. And then I got the directory for drive 1 on both directories. And I'm like, this is definitely bizarre. So that's when Ron Klein got with me because I was having these issues. And then he helped to get in contact with one of the MAME devs to get this filed and see if we could figure out what was going on. And there was a lot of people chiming in on what possible causes would be. But for me, it sounds like there still might be an underlying issue, but right now they found a workaround that has at least made everything at least work.
Right.
So, for now.
Well, so right. So that's one of the problems that you're going to hit with MAME occasionally, I think, is if I'm not mistaken. Basically, the problem is they had stuff working, and then somebody decided that the base floppy controller emulation wasn't, faithful enough or whatever, or needed to add those floppy drive sounds or whatever it is. And so they changed the underlying floppy emulation. And then when you do that, if it turns out the system emulation isn't using it the way you thought it was, or if you just didn't think about it. Even though you may have improved 80% of the systems, there's always a chance that one of the systems you've just broken, and in that case, that happened to be us. Is that the way you see it?
That's the way I see it. Right now, one of the things that, based on the changes they've made, I can't test the Dragon part of it because I don't know enough about Dragon, because the Dragon uses the same routines as the CoCo modules do. So, but, I don't know a thing for that, so I can't test it. But one of the things that was recently brought up by Ron was that there was, Donkey Kong Remix was taking extremely long time in MAME to load.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to look at it, and I timed it myself, and it took 2 minutes and 14 seconds to load Donkey Kong Remix off of a JVC-based disk image. And right. I was like, that's like
a long
extremely slow. And I'm like, well, let's do an experiment. So I decided to create a brand new disk image using what they call, there's a floppy emulator out there called the HXC floppy drive emulator.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess they support that disk image format that floppy drive emulator uses. So I chose to create the disk image using that because it's an MFM-based disk image. So it stores the track data, how it would be seen like a floppy drive would store it.
Right.
So I figured I would then format that disk image with BASIC. Then I'd do a backup command from the JVC disk image to the MFM-based disk image. And then I do that load to see what the load time was. And sure. I got 42.78 seconds. and that's a huge improvement. So it's like, so I decided to look at the source code, which if you're not a programmer, which I'm not, that source code is a headache to try to go through. But I followed the source code routines in MAME, and the way that from the way I'm gathering, looking at their code, they actually build the MFM track data in memory for everything. So the JVC disk image has to get converted into what would be seen on a floppy. So it builds the track in RAM. Well, when it does that, it's using a 1-to-1 interleave.
Right.
Which is basically there's no interleave. It's just one sector right after the other. And since they're emulating pretty darn close how a real floppy controller and the floppy drive would work together, well, a 1-to-1 with disk BASIC, it sucks.
It's really slow. And so if I can take a shot at that for the audience. So when you're talking about interleaving, you're talking about literally the physical placement of sectors on the tracks of the floppy drive or floppy disk as it spins in the drive. And well, instead of placing them where sector 2 comes right after sector 1, the fact is that the system needs a little time to process sector 1 before it gets the next sector. So they play a little trick where they actually kind of scramble the sector numbers on the floppy drive. So after sector 1 will come sector, 5 or whatever, some other sector number, and there'll be basically a skip factor in there. And so instead of being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it'd be like 1, 5, 9, 13, 17, or something like that. And so the problem is if you don't have that, if you go straight to sector 2, then the disk has to go all the way around, which seems like it's still pretty quick, but in reality, it takes a long enough time to notice if you have to do it for every track or every sector. And so what David's observing is that the MAMES emulator is trying to be very accurate, but also has to handle these different formats for usability's sake or whatever. And so internally, they've moved to this format that's based on the actual MFM data that's in the floppy drive. And if you're using an MFM-based floppy image, then that's good. That kind of maps together. But when you're using the JVC from the old Jeff Vavasor emulator format, it's actually a little too simple. And so the way they convert it makes it look like a diskette with that, no interleave or 1-to-1 interleave. And then their accuracy is so good that they even emulate the extra time it takes for that next sector to spin under. And so it's actually taking a lot longer. So I hope if there was anybody that wasn't following, hopefully that helps clear it up. Anyway, so yeah, that's pretty cool that you've been looking into that. You've had these observations. I've noticed those, and you're talking on CoCo Talk. So from what I gleaned from all that is that you actually have some understanding of how floppy diskettes work or how floppy controllers work beyond what most people in the community do. And so that's part of why I wanted to have you on to talk about stuff like that. So how did you build that knowledge set? How did you learn about floppy drives and floppy controllers?
Well, I probably don't know as much as you're hoping I do, but it's just, but it just comes from the fact that I guess I've just kind of locked onto it because the fact that, something I was doing when I got my first PC was trying to get extra storage space back then. And one of the tools on the PC was called FD format, which should allow you to get more sectors on a floppy disk on the PC. And a friend of mine back then had found me a similar utility for OS 9. And I'd completely forgotten about it because it'd been, many years since I'd used the CoCo for that type of stuff until Curtis had actually brought it up. And so I had gotten a copy of that from Curtis, and I started playing with that with the CoCo SDC, testing things out with it and a real floppy drive because, I still have real floppy drives. So I'm sitting here testing with this utility, formatting 2 extra sectors on a track, and playing with the CoCo SDC's raw disk image format, which is based loosely on the DMK disk image format. And so I was getting 20 sectors per track there. And strangely enough, I found a bug with the CoCo SDC, which wasn't really related to the extra sectors itself, but it was related to the fact that most people, when they're running OS 9, they're using the hard disk mode of the CoCo SDC. And in my case, I was using it as if it was just a regular floppy controller. Okay. So I was in Nitrous 9 level 2, and it was on a CoCo 3 with a 6309, and I was having issues formatting the disk image. And I'm sitting here going, why can I not format this? And this is one thing I like about Darren. He gets on this stuff faster than, I better not say that. But he's just literally right on stuff when something breaks. Or if you have a problem, that's not really a broken issue, but it's just a slight, it's off. Well, in this case, when you put it in full floppy emulation mode, and you're in OS9 level 2 at 6309 in the turbo mode, well, it wasn't moving the virtual head. The head was not stepping. So therefore, everything was being written on track 0.
Ooh.
And right. And as far as a disk image, I didn't know that because I don't know what is it, SDF. I didn't know how the SDF disk image format was supposed to look.
Right.
But Darren wanted me to send him the disk image, and he looked at it and he said, everything's being written to track 0. So he, he had me to do some tests, try just the 6809 version of Nitrous 9. Everything worked perfectly there. So it just happened to be just a slight timing issue.
Mm-hmm.
And Darren got around, got me a patch, and that fixed that issue.
Awesome.
So it's just certain things that when you start having issues, you either just say, I'm having problems and don't care to know why, or when you're getting involved in this stuff, then you're like, well, why is this not working?
Right.
How does this work?
And so for you, maybe me, maybe some other folks, that's part of the hobby, is figuring it out. That's part of the fun. But for some people, based on his comments, for say Steve Strobridge, he wants it to work, and so that it becomes not fun when things are broken, and that's very understandable. Whereas for us, it sort of becomes more fun when things are broken, right?
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, I just want to step in. So you mentioned the DMK format and the SDF format. Just want to mention for anyone who's not following or a little confused that these formats are actually probably, although they're different formats, they're actually different numbers in different places, sort of things. They're still basically they're similar in concept to that HXC format you were talking about earlier, where they contain more information in the disk image about what the physical disk actually looks like. So they're more complex formats than, say, the JVC, which again is just a very simple what's in the sectors kind of format. Let's see, what else were you saying? So you're talking about the FD format command. I remember seeing that back in the DOS days. And one thing that kind of confused me back then is, well, what do you mean I just got extra sectors on there? Aren't sectors just like tracks and just like memory or whatever? Doesn't the hardware have a specification? And so I wonder if you are in a position to explain how you can just add more tracks to a sector. Do you know how that works?
I do have a rough idea, because I've looked at the Western Digital's specification document,
right,
which tells you how you're supposed to lay out the track when you do a track write, which is how it writes that information through the floppy disk controller, so it knows how to build that when it sends the data to the floppy drive itself.
Right.
And there's certain values, at least in the documentation, that aren't supposed to change, and others are flexible to a certain degree. And in my own testing, using their documents, I fudged some numbers, and I managed, using the Western Digital document, to get it to 19 sectors. But that's the most I could get. And
right.
And I disassembled the format 20 command that Curtis had sent me, and looked at how it differed from the standard format command that's in Nitrous 9 currently. And Nitrous, in the format command, there's what they have is a pattern. So that way they can quickly build the track, and it has certain values and how many bytes are supposed to be, represented for what they call gap data,
right?
And which is part of the sector sector header, and then there's your actual sector data, and then there's more gap data and what they would have for the CRC calculations, and which is kind of like an error checking parts to make sure that the sector's good or bad. And one of the things that I was noticing, that the values that was in this special format command did not match the specifications at all. And so I looked at this and I'm like, I'm scratching my head. And I'm like,
how did they know to come up with that, right?
Yeah, and the thing is I'm still scratching my head, but sometimes, unless you know how the hardware works internally, which I do not, because obviously they don't get that much into the Western Digital documentation, but they obviously played around enough when they was coming up with this to find something that worked.
Yeah.
And it baffles me because technically it's way out of spec, so it shouldn't, but it does.
Right.
And what's even funny about that is the fact that MAME emulates it, and it works just like it does with the real floppy controller.
Oh, wow.
XROR even emulates it and works like it's supposed to. And VCC emulates it and works like it's supposed to.
So somewhere there must be a doc or something that does explain it, even if it's not official.
Somewhere. So so that was something that I was just interested in, just the fact that, that even the emulators are emulating that.
Sure.
And that's how. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, if I could take a shot at kind of that same explanation as so as I understand it, now I'm not a huge floppy expert or whatever, and I don't do weird things to my floppy drives like you do. but from my reading of the specs or whatever, is that part of that format track command, the data stream that you feed along with it. Well, so basically, as the disk spins, there's a certain amount of time for the whole track. And if you go beyond that, you're writing over the head of the track. And that's, so once you say start the format track, you feed your sequence of data, and those data, the data that you feed it defines the sector headers, and some of the data you send it is, or some of it's like magic commands that are like, write certain kinds of things or CRCs or whatever at certain places. And some of it is basically just gap data, just take up a certain amount of time based on how many bytes you write out. And so the main thing that allows you to put in an extra track here and there is to put in less of that gap data. And of course you're in charge of how the tracks are actually numbered anyway. And so, you can play around with that a bit, and that's kind of, at this point I'll have to start waving my hands, but that it's basically like that. So for those trying to follow along, it's like, well, again, how does that work? Isn't it all just magic? But you're dealing with this analog system, this analog thing, this floppy disk that's spinning like a record player. and so however much time it takes that spin is how much time you have to work with. And you have to leave a certain amount of time in some of these gaps for synchronization, basically for the hardware to stabilize and be able to figure out where on the disk you are and be able to find certain tracks or whatever. But sometimes the spec says you need, whatever the number is, you need 60 or something, but really you only need 55 of it. So if you only use 55, then you multiply that difference of 5 by however many, and then that gives you room for another track or another sector. Is that sort of how you understand it?
Yep, that's exactly how it is. You just, Western Digital has a listing of what their minimums are, but some of it you can keep reducing until it just errors.
Right.
Trial and error to come up with the numbers.
And then some of that might actually depend on exactly what controller hardware you have, what revision of the chip or whatever. I remember on a PC, it would often you could format a disk that would work on your system with 20 sectors or whatever, and take it to the next guy's system, and they wouldn't be able to read it at all. So I don't know. You might not have quite as much of that problem in the CoCo worlds, but maybe we had more similar hardware. I'm not sure, but. Anyway, I guess so that kind of brings me to the point where I wanted to ask you, so why do you care? Well, what is it about floppies that turns you on? What so we love that kind of stuff around here, and Neil and Mike both love floppies. I've actually grown to love them a little more. We all like CRT monitors. But you really love your floppies. What drives that, David?
I think it's just because it's the meshing of both the analog magnetic media and the digital side in such a way that, you can. There's been so many different types of floppy drives since the 8-inch, the 3.5, the 5 1/4. There's been other technologies that the government's had, which has varied, that hasn't been around for years. That all of it is still based on the analog magnetic media, and a lot of stuff that we use today is still used on the magnetic data, like our hard disk drives. They're the cheapest storage media that we have, and it's just something that's amazed at how much we can squeeze into these. Basically looks like a sheet of paper covered by nothing more than metal filings, and it's just something that is, I just don't know. It's interesting, the fact that you can, how you can store the data in that way. Because for me, I think it would be interesting to see how large of an actual floppy drive you could make if you had the resources to make your own. That would be interesting to me. I know that sounds like a crazy thing, but I've seen people do crazier things. So,
yeah, I knew this guy that made his CoCo 3 played video off of YouTube. All right. Well, I totally get what you're saying. It's just sometimes things turn you on. Speaking of turning people on, Mike, you've been kind of quiet. I've sort of driven a lot of this. So, what are your thoughts? What do you have to ask David?
I'm kind of curious. Was the CoCos you have now, are those your original CoCos, or did you have a period where you got rid of them and obtained new ones?
The original CoCo 2 that I got from Christmas, the only thing I have left of that is the motherboard. The CoCo 3, what's left of it is in a unfinished repack. And then I've got some other CoCos that I had acquired. My second CoCo 2 that I had acquired, I had lent to a friend for a while and got back not too long ago. And I've just acquired extra parts here and there, just as things opened up from, sadly, is when friends passed away or things like that from my area.
So, did you get? Were you involved in the CoCo at all before the 2016 CoCo Fest, or did that kind of reignite things for you?
No, I was gone for a while, but I had come back and I was, piddling around, not really in any, social limelight at all. I kind of stuck my head out once in a while on the CoCo list. But most of the time I was just kind of doing my own little thing.
Yeah. Oh, I have one more question for you, because a lot of people ask this, and that's about your alias, your Paco
Which one?
Otakte. Paco Otakte. What's the history behind that? Where did that come from?
Actually, that's a name that I came up with for gaming, for first-person shooters. Another thing that I'm kind of into is I'm not Native American, but since Native Americans were here before we moved in, I was always fascinated with their culture. So, and names for me, when you're playing games or stuff like that, having a name that has a meaning is important. And so therefore I went through the Native American names and chose something that would mean something in the game I was playing. And the Paco Otakte means eagle kills many, which technically in my case, I don't kill many. I'm usually the one that's dying all the time. But that's the name, how the name came to be. So.
Oh, cool.
Cool. Well, David, what do you have any other areas that you focus on other than the floppy stuff, or are you just a floppy madman?
No. The only thing that I keep getting myself in trouble with lately, as far as somewhat CoCo related, is I've just recently got into microcontrollers. So, and actually attempting to design my own hardware.
Okay.
So I've been working on PS2 mouse to the CoCo joystick port adapter. So
yeah,
it's been an interesting learning experience. I'll say that.
Cool. And so you're using a microcontroller to decode the PS2 signals, and then some kind of variable resistor or something for the to interface to the CoCo?
Yeah, a SPI interface based DAC.
Okay.
So,
cool.
Yeah, very cool.
So it's been a learning experience. Nothing like Jim Brain's work or, your interesting hardware projects or John Strong or anybody else.
Well, you do what you have to scratch your itch and take it from there. So what about taking floppy disk and making music with them, floppy drives? You ever do any of that? You've seen those projects, right?
Yeah, I've seen some of those projects where people have taken the old drives that weren't reading anymore, and they've used microcontrollers and
make them buzz and stuff.
Yeah, they'd make MIDI processors, and then certain MIDI instruments would go to certain floppy drives that was the closest noise they could get for that instrument. And then I've seen them. It's was actually a very interesting thing. I've heard people playing everything from the Imperial March from Star Wars to James Bond theme to all kinds of different things.
Yeah. So, but that's not something that you've picked up?
No. I don't have, what they call the musical talent in me.
That's understandable. Well, David, what have we not asked you? What's your deep dark secret that we haven't exposed?
I don't know. No.
Is it a Chevy or a Ford guy or?
No, I'm driving a Ford, which is part of my issues lately. But yeah, we ain't going to discuss that any further past that.
Sounds like maybe you should be a Dodge man. Well, cool. Well, Mikey, you got anything else?
No, just appreciate you finding these bugs in the emulators. Keeps people improving them.
I think that's a really key thing that you're finding them, and you're not just throwing your hands down and stomping off, or trying to find the 10 revisions back version that worked and just use that. And you're actually cooperating with the guys developing the code. And I think they really do want everything to work correctly. And so if you give them their bug reports, in general, you can always find a jerk here or there, right? But in general, I think they'll appreciate it and want you to help them fix their problems, or help them identify, verify that they fixed them. So I think that's good. That's a good example to set for the community.
Absolutely.
Reporting them and like I said, not nagging and not showing up and saying you screwed up or whatever, but saying, hey, we got this problem, and let's see if we can figure it out. I think that's a real good example.
Yeah, and that's before Ron and I started talking about that issue that I'd found, I hadn't said anything really too much about it, because up until the point that it went from it was annoying because Nitrous 9 wasn't working on the emulator the way I had expected it should have been, to corrupting a disk image, that's when it became more critical.
Flag, yeah.
Yeah, but it'd been sat on for probably 2 months, and I put something on the GitHub page in there that I was having these issues, but for anybody that's listening, they have a separate web page that's called MAME Testers, which is where you need to actually file the primary bug reports, because the GitHub site, they look at them, but they really look at the ones that's at the MAME Testers website. So if you find a problem, that's where you need to go.
Well, that's good advice. Yeah, so any project's going to have a process or whatever. I wish we could avoid all process, but sometimes you can't avoid it.
Yeah, because up until I started talking with Steve and being on his show, before all the YouTube stuff, I've been kind of more of a person that kept to myself. And, if I found problems, I usually didn't report them because I didn't want to be that person that stirred up the stank, so to speak. But now I'm finding that, especially on the CoCo list, where I've seen some people that have come up and said, hey, I've had this issue too, but people don't seem to want to report that they're having issues until someone else does. And from my point of view, if you don't bring the problem forward, no one's ever going to know that there's an issue. So
exactly.
So if you're having a problem, bring it forward. Say, hey, I'm having this issue. Get it out there instead of just sitting on it until it's never fixed, or heaven forbid, the people that are working on it don't exist anymore, and then it will be impossible for it to be fixed.
Right.
Or a lot more difficult, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's good. And like you said, be report it for sure, but be respectful. Most of these guys aren't making any money working on name or whatever else, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, definitely report stuff. And most of them would rather hear your bug report and know that there's a bug than just go off and pretend that nothing's wrong and have it be wrong. So you're not hurting anybody's feelings in general, as long as you don't, just show up and say, "You idiots, you screwed up," whatever. Nobody wants to hear that, but
yeah.
But yeah, no, that's good. Well, David, I think this has been a good talk. I definitely have enjoyed hearing from you, and I appreciate you taking your time to be with us. So,
thank you.
Unless you have something else you want to add.
No, the only thing I want to add is thank you for having me, and I appreciate the invite.
Definitely. No, I think this was good. If nothing else, we'll make up for the CoCo Talk guys giving you a little crap here and there. Maybe. You tell them to be nice, or you'll leave the show. Be with us. All right. Well, appreciate it, and we'll just go ahead and call this call this interview done. All right.
All righty.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Mike.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest in the studio with us today, the world-famous Blaise Pascal. Mr. Pascal, thank you so much for joining us today.
Tous les plaisirs est pour moi. I'm so sorry, the pleasure is all mine.
So, is it true that you invented one of the first digital calculators?
Ah, yes, the Pascaline. My father was a tax collector, and he needed a faster way to make the necessary calculations. Don't get me started on French monetary structure. No me bon.
And you are also well known for your inventions such as the syringe and the hydraulic press.
Yes, you embarrass me, of course. I did a lot of stuff, as you say, but let me tell you what I am most impressed with.
What would that be, Mr. Pascal?
Deft Pascal, a color computer with as little as 32K of RAM, can be used to develop software using the programming language named after myself.
I'm not following you.
Pascal Workbench provides a complete development environment for your color computer. Edit your Pascal source code, compile it, and then run it. C'est très facile. Don't forget the excellent debugger. You can set breakpoints, examine variables and memory locations. You can even singly step through your code. Très bon.
That is impressive.
Oui, very impressive.
Well, folks, there you have it. Pascal on Pascal.
Pardon? Are these donuts for anyone?
Sure, help yourself. Where are you off to next, Mr. Pascal?
I have spent much time studying probable outcomes. Time for some applied science. I'm headed to Vegas, baby. Time to redefine Pascal's wager.
Deft Pascal for the TRS-80 color computer. From Deft Systems Incorporated. Hi, I'm Mike Rowan, one of the organizers of Tandy Assembly. We look forward to seeing everyone in Chillicothe, Ohio. I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about one of the great events at Tandy Assembly. That's the No Minimum Bid Auction. First, all of the auction items are donated. All proceeds from the auction will go toward the cost of the event. The auction is a great opportunity to get some big bargains on unusual vintage computer items. It's also a great deal of fun to see people, sometimes best friends, trying to outbid each other. We certainly hope you'll join in the fun at Tandy Assembly. As I said before, all of the auction items are donated. If you have any items or duplicates in your collection that you are willing to donate to the auction, we would certainly appreciate your donations. Just bring them to Tandy Assembly or contact us through our webpage, www.tandyassembly.com. Thanks, and we look forward to a great time with everyone at Tandy Assembly.
All right, and we're back. We're going to have another discussion. This one is less likely to make anyone mad at us. I hope the last one didn't do that. But this one shouldn't, I don't think. Anyway, as being involved in retro computing, unless you confine yourself to use of emulators, you probably have to be at least somewhat of a collector to pick up the hardware that you want to use to run your stuff. And, sure, lots of stuff will work on basic systems, but it's not too long before you want, you want a joystick to play the games with, and you want, a different piece of hardware for loading code or something, whatever exists for your system. You want a CoCo STC for your CoCo. or maybe you want a printer or whatever. Who knows what your interests are? It's very easy to kind of become addicted, shall we say? Going out to the local thrift stores or whatever, or hitting eBay. eBay is probably the most dangerous in that. If you are kind of having an addictive personality or whatever the right term is, it's very easy to get in a loop where you're constantly buying on eBay, and PayPal and eBay work together and make it very easy for you to spend a bunch of money, and you can hook up your credit card to all that, and pretty soon you might, if you're not careful, you're going to max out your credit cards and have a room full of what most people would consider junk. So. And now I have a big room full of what a lot of people would consider junk, but I mostly accumulated it over a long period of time. Don't call hoarders. I'm sure they'd love to see it, but
well, just remember, it's not hoarding if you know where everything is.
That's right. But in this case, it's hoarding. But so I guess the question is, if you're into vintage collecting, when is enough? How do you limit yourself? How do you keep yourself from going over the edge? And like I said, some people, maybe it's no big deal. Some people don't want to hold a bunch of stuff, whatever. But, some people are like kids in a candy store, and, they go to a VCF, and if they could, they'd walk away with everybody's stuff in the back of the truck. So how do you limit yourself? So I'll start with one thing I used to do is I would limit myself to things that I had a personal connection with as a child. So mostly the CoCo, maybe the Atari 2600, and a couple of other things. But before long, that one expanded a bit too. Well, my grandparents had a television, and the kid down the street had a ColecoVision. So those were okay. And then there's like, well, once you have the Intellivision, the Mattel Aquarius is kind of related. And so it's a bit of a slippery slope. But I don't know. Do you guys have any rules like that for yourself to kind of, when you see something that looks cool, but you still say, nah, that breaks the rule, I'm not going to get it? Anything like that?
What you were saying, stuff that you have a personal connection with, but then, it slowly gets out of hand, I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't think I have any set rule. Other than how much money I have available. Right, but I do find, it's real easy when you find something that's priced well. Price of things go up. You see a CoCo 2 for $20, you're like, oh yeah, I should get that. But then you realize, oh, I've already got 15. I don't need to get another one.
Right.
You're just there's kind of part of you that says, oh, I don't want that to end up in a dumpster somewhere, right. But yeah, you just have to keep it in check. I know when I first got back into retro computing, I bought everything I never had, because I couldn't afford it. I had Osbornes, K-Pros, and Moros, and everything from my childhood, or the stuff that I didn't ever get to toy with. And but what I ended up doing was I resold all of that just to focus on the CoCo, because that was really my passion. And even CoCo things, I've bought kind of rare off the wall things just so I could hold them, touch them, hook them up, see what they were about. And then I put them back out on eBay for someone else to check out if it wasn't something, I just got that experience and thought, okay, I'm done with this. I've experienced it. It's kind of cool, and I'll let someone else enjoy it.
Sure.
How about you, Boise?
Well, I don't think I have a problem. Maybe that's the first step in admitting you have a problem. Is
yeah, actually, right.
Yeah, right. So for me, it's of course, I only concern myself with the CoCo, right? I don't have other systems that I really focus on, so that kind of limits me right there. And I target my acquisitions somewhat on price, Mike. I know exactly what you mean. You're on eBay, you see a smoking deal on a CoCo, and you're thinking, man, this thing is just, it's going to end up, being sent to an abused home or something and tossed. So you out of the goodness of your heart, you want to rescue it. But what I try to do is I try to maintain a spreadsheet of the items that I'm interested in. There's a lot of things I'm not. For instance, I'm not interested in the electronic book for the CoCo that Tandy sold. I don't need another modem pack. Stuff like that. It'd be nice to have one of each, but I tend to limit my acquisitions to projects that I may want to experiment at the time with. So maybe, if I have two CoCo 2s I want to hook together or create an embedded controller with, and of course there's always the temptation, right? I want one in the box and just in case, just for preservation. So if you have to be careful with that too, because one in the box and one out the box could turn into a lot. So I think just trying to smartly manage your collection by targeting what you want, keeping track of a spreadsheet so you don't duplicate purchases, and being willing to let go. That is a big thing. I've gotten to the point several times in the course of my life with the CoCo where I sort of accumulated a little too much, and you got to learn to let the valve open a bit and let out some pressure.
And the Tandy Assembly is good. The Tandy Assembly auction would be a great place if you've got a bunch of stuff that you're wanting to let go of.
Right. Yeah, we will help you with that for sure. You may hurt everybody else, but the more you got to get rid of, the more we'd like to help. All right. Well, yeah. So, like I said, I think it's good to have, like you say, maybe some rules that you can kind of help you when you get that fever. That's like you say, when you find that $20 CoCo 2 or whatever. I mean, that is hard when you find something that you know it's kind of rare. And the price is not, the price is really low for how rare it is. It's hard not to jump in and snatch it up.
That's true.
Yeah.
But maybe you shouldn't. Let somebody else get a hold of it once in a while. Who knows? But and like you say, I think Mike, you have a good thing there. Was like, well, some of it you probably just wanted to kind of experience it, hold it in your hands, know what it was like. You know that it had that funny dent on the side or whatever. Maybe once you have that, maybe you can let it go. Maybe that's probably a more zen way to live, right? You can just get rid of it. Helps your pocketbook a little bit. Helps your space stay a little cleaner.
The other thing.
So go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing that happens too. I find if you collect too much stuff, you don't end up using it all, and then it could actually work in the negative effect where you just don't feel like doing anything because you just have too much to get into and you just don't get into anything.
Just overwhelmed.
You're overwhelmed, yeah. So that's not good either. Like if you want to focus on something, it's good to have a path and kind of go that direction.
Yeah, no, that's true. I do sometimes. You find a little bit of time. It's like, well, what would I work on? If you only had one thing, you'd work on the next thing to do with that. But when you have 10 things, it's like, well, I've got an hour. What can I do with that? And
right.
What can I do something with an hour? Well, whatever. I could do this. Whatever. And you spend 45 minutes of your hour figuring out what you can pick up.
It's true. It's true.
John, I can see an episode of Hoarders where you're just stumbling around this big room with a hip hop full of CoCo boxes, and the person's saying, "Now you have to let go of this, John. You have to let go of this." You're like, "No, wait a minute. No, this I want to keep this.
I need this one. I need this."
Right. That's a low serial number.
That's right.
Well, that's a white case. I can't let that one go. Not the TGP 100.
I need that dust cover.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone say dust cover?
Yeah.
I bought a printer just because of that reason, eh? And I'm sure Boise remembers.
Yep, I do. I sold it to you.
The dust cover sold me. It really did.
See what I talk about letting go when I talk about letting go, Neil? That's what I did. I let go.
Yeah, he let go. He was your example, Neil. Oh, boy. All right. Well, I'm not sure we solved anyone's real problem here, but maybe we entertain. So
we are not doctors, but we'll take a look anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Why don't we draw this one to a close and come back in a little bit.
Your computer is an extension of your mind. Doesn't it deserve protection? Why can't the Practical look fabulous?
Introducing high-fashion dust covers from Radio Shack.
Tandy has collaborated with fashion designers from Paris, Milan, Barcelona, and Berlin. Introducing the Soft Shield Collection by Tandy. Pamper your CoCo with luxurious ermine and silk. Drench your TRS-80 Model 3 in delicious blue velour with faux alligator piping for a whimsical yet alluring look. Bring out the playful side of that Model 4 with emerald and gold serpentine veiling. Your computer will be ready for the runway in no time. The Soft Shield Collection, only available at Radio Shack, a Tandy company. Tandy Assembly offers attendees a unique opportunity to meet and interact with other fans of Radio Shack and Tandy computers from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Something new is here. Speakers include TRS-80 creator Don French, author of Star Trek III and Dog Star Adventure Lance Miklas, and game designer Scott Adams of Adventure International. Vendors include Bartlett Labs, Cloud9, Neil's Computer Service, Retro Innovations, Retro Tinker, and Strongware. Meet podcasters from Floppy Days, the CoCo Crew Podcast, TRS-80 Trash Talk, and YouTube sensation The Original Gamer Stevie Stroh. Join us for 2 days of retro computing fun in Chillicothe, Ohio, October 7th and 8th. For more information, visit our website at www.tandyassembly.com.
All right, welcome back, CoCo Cruisers. We've got one more host discussion this month we'd like to talk about. As some of you may be aware, there's a book that's been popular amongst us retro geeks for a while. So by Ernest Cline, named Ready Player One. Ready Player One is being adapted as a movie by Steven Spielberg, because of course it's Steven Spielberg. And this movie, this book, has a kind of a direct connection to the Tandy color computer, for those who have read it. For those who haven't read the book, or waiting to keep it secret till the movie comes out or whatever, you may want to skip this section, because we're not going to control ourselves. We're not going to avoid spoilers. You're just going to have to deal with it. No, that said, we're not going to go line by line on the book either. We're just going to talk in general. But anyway, so the book is set in a dystopian future where the global warming or whatever is destroying the world and blah blah blah. And there's a virtual reality computer system called Oasis that people plug into, and they even, like, kids plug into it and go to school, don't actually leave the house. People interact online around the world, whatever. It's kind of like the way teenagers walk around at the mall with their face in their phones, but a lot cooler technology. And like I said, there is the creator of this system is in the book. It talks about how he got his start using the Tandy color computer, which means he's one of us. So anyway, the game is slated to come out in March of 2018. Originally, it was going to be released in December of 2017, but it's been pushed back to avoid competition with Star Wars. So definitely a geek movie, but anyway, we thought it might be a nice piece to talk about. Boise read it recently, was pretty excited about it. Mike's read it, Neil's read it, I've read it. I read it a couple of years ago, and when I got to one particular part, I was just kind of, browsing along, and we got to one particular part, and I was grinning from ear to ear. Couldn't believe that anybody was covering my favorite computer in a model, in a novel, even one set in this kind of weird retro-centric future. Anyway, if you are a connoisseur of 80s culture, this book is for you. It is full of references to various things, Spielberg movies and arcade games and DeLorean cars and Atari 2600 games. It is just a blast for people of a certain age, shall we say. Well, it looks like we have Boise back. Are you back, Boise?
Yeah, sorry, I hit the wrong button.
It's all right.
So you want me to talk about my impressions of the book?
Yeah, well, why don't you go ahead?
Well, I didn't read the book. I bought an audiobook version of it.
Oh, okay.
But it was actually, listening to it that way was good. That's really the first time I've used an audiobook, because I usually do read. Will Wheaton was the voiceover actor for that reading, and he did very well. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great book. Like you, when it got to the point where the CoCo was mentioned, and I knew that was going to happen. It was really interesting just how much the CoCo played a part into the book. Right, it wasn't just a cursory mention or passing mention. It was a substantial part of the path that the character had to take to get his quest done. So I really liked that. And I guess after I got to listening to the book and got to the end, I felt like I came away thinking, you know what? This is a really cool idea for a book. If I would have thought about that, myself, all of the ingredients were there, right? We knew everything that was going on, the 80s, pop culture stuff. It was just masterfully done, and I was really impressed with it. And I kind of kicked myself for thinking, wow, it would have taken a little bit of imagination to come up with that, but the basic ingredients were there to write something similar. It was really good.
Yeah, it just for me, it's just so gratifying to see the tribute there to the Dungeons of Daggerath. Just to see Dungeons of Daggerath mentioned was just by itself.
Yeah.
Because that's a game that didn't exist on other systems. That's gonna hurt me when that when they do the movie adaptation, they're gonna throw in an Apple II or something, and I'm gonna be screaming in the movie theater, "You couldn't do that on the Apple!"
Yeah, they'll probably have an Apple with the Oregon Trail.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, so for those who aren't familiar, basically the premise is that the creator of this Oasis system dies, and he reveals that he's left Easter eggs in the game, and then if you find them and figure them out, you basically get a scavenger hunt or treasure trail or whatever. That lets you win the game, and then basically you inherit his company that's responsible for this Oasis system. And so, and like I said, the guy is really into 80s culture and references to whatever. And so these kids familiarize themselves with reruns of 80s movies and whatever else. There's a scene where the protagonist has to role play the Matthew Broderick character from War Games through a reenactment of the movie War Games as part of as part of his task or whatever. And there's it's another part where he has to fight the Lich in the Dungeons and Dragons module that I'm sure for those of us who played Advanced Dungeons and Dragons back in the day, it'll seem very familiar. But like I said, the color computer references were very, validating for me. It's like somebody else thought that this system must have been cool, so cool that they thought that someone who got their start in the color computer could become the mastermind of this amazing system. And of course, it's all just fiction, whatever. It's a little silly, but I was very gratified by that. And like I said, now that it's, I almost wish it wasn't there, just because with this movie coming, I'm just convinced that they're going to mess it up when they do that reference. They're going to leave that scene out, or they're going to put in an Apple II or a Commodore.
Let's hope not.
Really hope they don't do that. They've already changed the movie a little bit, because in the trailer, I think that and Neil, I mentioned this to you, in the book he starts out living in the stacks, which is a stack of trailers in, I think in Oklahoma City, and in the trailer, they say in Columbus, Ohio, so they've already got the city changed.
Right. Yeah, it kind of makes sense they did that, though, because just to abridge it, because the Oasis or whatever is all in the Columbus area, as I recall. So
yeah, well, I mean,
you're going to expect
there'll be some changes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge book, and to push it into a feature-length movie, you're going to have to make some trimming here and there. But obviously, I think if you read the book, or if you read the book, you're going to enjoy the film more, because you'll know all the backstories that you couldn't get from not reading the book.
Yeah. The other thing about the book I'd like to mention is the characters. I mean, it's just amazing. Following the characters, you feel like you're right there with them. You're captivated by them.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of character depth that kind of wins you over early on and keeps you curious about what's going to happen. And I saw an Amazon review that described it the best. It said, "This is nostalgia porn." And that's an apt description, because if you grew up in the 70s, 80s, it's just chock full of your childhood and your experiences. So you'll identify with it and root for the characters.
Right.
It's an amazing book. I picked it up because of you guys. I mean, I recommended it. I'm not even a fiction fan, and this book is just amazing.
Cool. Well, so everyone's excited for the movie, I assume, right? We're all planning to see the movie.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Definitely. Yeah.
We're all going to go to the same theater at the same time, right?
Yeah,
Well, we'll just wait until CoCo Fest and go as a CoCo Fest. What do you think? We'll probably still be in the theaters then.
Yeah, hey, that'd be cool if we could get a bunch of people to go.
That actually might be kind of cool.
If any of you talk in the movie while it's playing, I'm going to pop you upside the head.
Well, I'll tell you what, if they keep the CoCo in the movie, we ought to plan a CoCo Fest movie run, and it ought to include the Galloping Ghost arcade in a movie.
Yeah,
that'd be pretty cool.
Maybe a pre-CoCo Fest event.
Yeah, well, we could do that too.
Something to think about is if the CoCo is in the movie, how would the presence of that in the movie, and I'm assuming the movie will be quite popular, how will that affect the CoCo community? Will we see a growth spurt? Will we see interest?
I wouldn't be surprised if we did see a little bounce of downloads or whatever as people see. If it actually had the CoCo in there, people might say, I had one of those. I wonder if anybody's still out there playing Dungeons of Daggerath or whatever. Yeah. So it might be a boon for us. It'd be kind of cool.
It would.
And maybe they'll all get in line every week for CoCo Talk. Overwhelm Steve too. That'd be fun.
Well, next time I'm at Steven Spielberg's house, I'll ask him about it.
Oh, well, that'd be good. When you're working on Ernest Cline's DeLorean. I guess we could just pivot right there. How many of us really would like to have a DeLorean? I'd like to have one.
That's one of my dream cars.
Never rust.
That's true.
Back in Boston, when I go up to Boston once a month, we had a corporate apartment. We're just getting rid of it now. But at the time I would go, I was going, a week every 6 weeks or so. In the parking garage where we had our corporate apartment, where I would park the car, there was an actual DeLorean in the garage, like maybe, I don't know, a couple of car spots away from me. And it for the longest time, it had 3 tires on and one tire was off, and sort of the tire was underneath the wheel, kind of propping up the car as though somebody was working on it on the side, but it was an actual DeLorean.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't think that hard to come by if you really want one, but you got to want it. You know what I mean?
The price is going to
I'm sure they have, and you can ask Ben. Ben Anding was there; he saw it. It was astounding.
Did it have the big wide side, white side walls, like in Back to the Future 2?
It had as I recall, they had some type of a vanity plate, and I don't remember what it was, but it was certainly some kind of a harkening back to the original movie. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty funny. All right. Well, anything else on Ready Player One?
Read the book.
Yeah, read the book. Go see the movie. I think everyone that enjoys this podcast will probably enjoy it, especially if they stay true to the CoCo parts of the book. That's what I'm really hoping for. I was definitely excited. I couldn't believe it when I was reading that book and started talking about him sitting down to play Dungeons and Dragons and popping the cartridge in the side and whatever else. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe they're writing this.
Now, did you know that beforehand when you got that book?
No, I had no idea.
Oh, nice. That must have been a surprise.
That was a huge surprise. Very cool. All right. Well, I guess, we beat this one to death. And so we'll draw this one to a close and we'll take another break and come back with the rest of the show.
Something new is coming.
Tandy Assembly. Tandy Assembly is about Radio Shack and Tandy computers.
Tandy Assembly is about interacting.
Tandy Assembly is about people.
Tandy Assembly is about fun.
The first gathering of its kind.
Computers of the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
All Radio Shack and Tandy makes and models. Join us. Don't miss Tandy Assembly.
In Chillicothe, Ohio.
October 7th and 8th.
Whether you're near or far.
Tandy Assembly is for everyone. Visit our webpage at www.tandyassembly.com.
Tandy Assembly.
Where can you catch all the latest news and information about the Tandy Color Computer and Compatibles? Oh yeah. I'm talking about the CoCo Crew Podcast. Dig it each month. Join John, Neil, and Mike as they lay down the latest news and information about the Radio Shack Tandy Color Computer and Compatibles. Groove to interviews, tech segments, and discussions all about the Radio Shack Tandy Color Computer. Strut your fine self over to www.cococrew.org and start listening today. The CoCo Crew Podcast. Keeping it CoCo, dig?
All right, welcome back, CoCo Cruisers. It's time for another tech segment. This is John Linville, your host. And we're going to talk a little bit more about putting basic programs on a ROM cartridge. And we kind of covered that last week, and this technique's going to be, or last month rather, this technique will be pretty similar. But there is a difference in that we're going to talk about how to do this with programs that run specifically on the CoCo 3. So yeah, not long after the the blog post that was inspired last month's tech segment, someone asked about doing the same thing on a CoCo 3. And I hadn't really thought about it before that, but immediately I kind of suspected where the problems might be, and that the CoCo 3 does some weird tricks in initializing itself, and part of which includes moving the ROM code images into RAM and executing from there. Anyway, it's just a different boot up process, and so it's not surprising that you might have to deal with a different sequence. So, I was a little bit surprised as I looked into it. Originally, I pretty much thought that the CoCo 3 boot ROMs were essentially just the same as the CoCo 1 or 2, non-extended basic boot ROM and extended basic boot ROMs, pretty much unaltered. And then I knew that when it came time to add the extra ROMs for the CoCo 3 to take advantage of the gimme and the extra memory and that sort of stuff, I knew that Microware had kind of implemented or possibly devised this mechanism where they copy the ROM image to RAM and then patch it up a little bit to add some new commands or whatever. But I didn't realize that there had actually been changes made to the base, the original CoCo ROMs, the CoCo 1 and 2 ROMs, if you will. But it turns out there were. I won't go over them all now. If you want to learn more about it, of course, the Super Extended Color Basic Unraveled book, I think that's the proper title, is a good place to check into it, and it'll explain all about it there. But Super Extended Basic Unraveled, or Unraveled 2, the PDF is available for downloading. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, I guess. But so anyway, it turns out that as part of the boot process, the code, the basic boot ROM gets changed a bit, and it executes the whole copy stuff around sequence. It turns out there are some changes to the original Color Basic and Extended Basic ROMs. These changes are actually burned into the hardware. If you want some details, you can check out the book Super Extended Basic Unraveled 2, which is available as a PDF online for downloading. I'll try to put a link in the show notes. Anyway, among these changes, the startup code is changed to transfer control to the CoCo 3 ROM early in the boot process. When it gets there, the code copies the contents of the basic ROMs to RAM, and then applies a variety of patches to the now RAM code that came out of ROM. So once it's done with that, the patched ROM code is entered, and Basic takes the opportunity to initialize itself. So as part of that basic initialization, it hits the cartridge auto start sequence that we're already familiar with. And so the change there now is when the cartridge auto start is detected, then the CoCo 3 re-enables the ROMs. So it takes it kind of basically turns off what it just did, and it jumps to the code at the start of the cartridge. So when the cartridge code is entered from the CoCo 3, the ROMs are present in memory. If you access the ROM addresses, you'll actually access the ROM hardware itself. But prior to that, the machine had copied the contents of ROM to RAM, and then patched up the RAM copy with all the CoCo 3 goodness that enables the special super extended basic commands. The point being that, and maybe it's a little easy to miss, but the point being is that once the CoCo 3 initializes itself, and so everything that wants to act like a CoCo 3 is sitting out there in RAM. But then they hit the auto start cartridge code and essentially undid all of that. Or it didn't really undo it, it just kind of ignored it. And so it's actually still sitting out there in the RAM that's used for backing up the ROM, for replacing the ROM. It's just that now that ROM replacement is turned off, and so your cartridge is running with the actual hardware ROMs in place. So you're not really running, the cartridge isn't really running on the CoCo 3 per se, it's running on something that looks a lot more like a CoCo 2. So it's not really a surprise that a CoCo 3 specific program, Super Extended Basic program, isn't going to run in that environment. So, kind of once I reached this realization, it occurred to me that basically all it really changed was before when it detected the cartridge, it swapped the ROM back into place. The RAM's still sitting out there. It's sitting there written just like it was right before that switch, which means it's got all the changes that it needs in the RAM, or the RAM version of the ROM, shall we say, are all still sitting there, just inaccessible because of the way the memory management stuff has all been set up. Or in this case, it's actually the SAM emulation part of the gimme. So what do you need to do then? Well, you need to flip it back. And it turns out that's pretty easy to do in general, in that you just have to access, it's just a memory access to a specific location. That's hexadecimal FFDF. So the only trick is, if you actually do it in code, it might be a little bit hard to figure out how to jump around or whatever. You might would have to write a little trampoline utility out to RAM somewhere, and jump from there to flip things around. Because otherwise, when you start flipping memory maps around, you could kind of swap your own self out and not be accessing the code, and that wouldn't be too good, would it? So we already had this kind of trick in our bootloader program for our basic cartridge, where at the end of the program, after we moved over our basic program to RAM, we would poke into the keyboard buffer the command RUN for run, right? Well, so the memory access that we need to do to turn the RAM version, the RAM copy of the ROMs back on, it can be done in BASIC with a poke command. So we just extend our little trick, and so instead of only poking in RUN, we poke in into the keyboard buffer POKE ampersand HFFDF, 0, RUN. So that does our poke, puts the RAM copy of the ROM back in place, with including all the changes that enable the CoCo 3 to act like you expected CoCo 3 to act, and then it executes the run, which we've already messed around in RAM, the RAM that's supposed to act like a RAM. We've already put our copy of the basic program out there, and just like we did with our original version, and so the point being that now that we've put our ROM back, our RAM version of ROM with the patches back in place, now the CoCo 3 basic program is able to run just fine. And so, as proof of that, I took Robert Galt's palette.base program from out on the web. It's hosted out at aaronwolf.com, or robert.galt, blah, blah, blah. Maybe I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. But anyway, I processed that as described in the earlier blog post, added the new version of the loader, built the ROM image, and loaded up just in the emulator, I think, but I suspect it'll still work with real hardware. and it worked, and that's definitely a CoCo 3 Super Extended Color Basic program, and Bob's your uncle. So there you go. It's kind of a follow-on to last month's tech segment. Now we've got this month's tech segment to tell you how you do it on a CoCo 3. Hopefully you've enjoyed all that. If not, well, maybe we'll get on to something new and different next month. All right. Well, I hope you've enjoyed it. Take care. CoCo forever. Thanks.
What's going on, CoCo Cruisers? The original gamer Stevie Stroh here, and I'm the host of CoCo Talk. What is CoCo Talk, you ask? Well, we are a weekly live talk show on YouTube featuring the Tandy Color computer. And guess what? CoCo Talk is now also available as an audio podcast for your listening pleasure. So when you are done listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast, come check us out at cocotalk.live for weekly live talk featuring the Tandy Color computer. We'll see you there, CoCo Cruisers.
New from Tri-State Pictures. A fun day at the circus.
Hey, check it out. Let's go in there. Yeah, let's do it.
Except for the curious.
3 new players for my game.
Not cool. Let us out of here.
The sound you hear is the air being pumped out of the chamber.
This guy's a psycho here.
High above you are balloons filled with oxygen. Pop the balloons if you want to live.
It's too high. We can't reach them. Look over here. It's one of those clown trampolines. Come on, start jumping. It's getting hard to breathe. Not cool.
If any of you die, you all die.
Clowns and Balloons rated R.
As John would say, welcome back, CoCo Cruisers. Oh, wow, that's hard to say, actually. On this segment of Neil's Corner, I will be talking about a game called Clowns and Balloons. This is a game I've actually never really played until a few days ago. I've avoided it back in the day because of my fear of clowns. No, I'm just joking. I'd never played it back in the day because I never owned the cartridge. However, I am definitely serious about having a fear of clowns. The whole circus and clown thing is a bit strange if you ask me. Well, luckily, I do own this cartridge now, and after hearing Myro's frightening commercial, I figured it's time to pop this cartridge in and give it a play. First, a quick rundown. Clowns and Balloons was programmed in 1982 by our famous Steve Bjork and was published by Datasoft. It was licensed to Tandy and sold in Radio Shack stores across the nation. Its media was delivered via a ROM cartridge, and it requires, I hope you're sitting down for this, a whopping 16K of memory. Alright, on to the game. Well, I was pleasantly surprised playing this for the first time. I quickly noticed it was based off of Atari's original Circus arcade game, although with this version having nicer graphics and sound, at least in my opinion. The object of the game is to pop all the balloons on each level. You control a trampoline at the bottom of the screen, which is held by 2 characters. On the trampoline is a clown that is bouncing in all directions on the screen to pop the balloons above. As you move the trampoline side to side, you must keep the clown bouncing on it and not let him fall off and hit the ground. The longer you keep the clown bouncing, the higher he will go up on the screen. As you clear a line of balloons, the game will play a small circus tune and pause for a quick second, giving a bit of a breather. This game is actually very fun and addictive. It plays at a very smooth pace. Amazing a game this good only requires 16K of memory. If you haven't played this game before, I highly recommend checking it out. It only took me nearly 30 years to try it, but hey, better late than never. Alright, well that's all for now. Until next month, happy CoCo Gaming.
After these messages,
we'll be right back.
Hey everybody, I'm the original gamer Stevie Stroh, and I'm a coconut. And if you like the Tandy Color computer too, then you might want to visit imacoconut.com for all your color computer needs. There you will find links to communities and to project and blog sites, emulators, software downloads, buy-sell trade sites, and more. So for all of your color computer needs, visit imacoconut.com today and tell them the original gamer Stevie Stroh sent you.
Well, you guessed it. We have reached the end of episode 28. I can't believe that in less than 1 week we will all be at Tandy Assembly. It seems like it was only a few weeks ago John and I were cruising through his area, kicking around ideas of having our own CoCo and Tandy computer event. Then a month later, once Myro found out, boom, things started to happen. If you don't know Myro, once this guy gets an idea, he really gets things done. Before I knew it, we had a team of 5 helping to put this event on. And on that note, we hope to see all of you there. As always, I'd like to thank our host John Linville for coming up with these excellent tech segments, and we'd also like to thank Mike Rowan, or should I say Myro, because it has caught on, for creating these amazing commercials and being a full-time part of the podcast now. Also like to thank Boise Pete for joining us again. Always great to have you on here with us. Last but not least, I'd like to thank all of you for listening each month and sending in your feedback. stay tuned for next month's episode for the latest coverage and gossip on Tandy Assembly. CoCo and Retro Forever.